You said you loved me. Sophia's voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It landed like a stone dropped into still water, and the silence after it was worse than any scream. Alexander didn't even turn around. That was the moment she knew. If you've ever loved someone who looked right through you, stay with me, because this story is going to change the way you see betrayal power and the kind of strength you never knew you had. Subscribe to our channel, follow this story all the way to the end, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The elevator doors opened on the 14th floor of the Romano building at exactly 9:47 on a Tuesday night, and Sophia Bennett stepped out carrying a bag of takeout food, a borrowed umbrella still dripping from the rain outside, and 3 years of absolute unconditional trust. She had not called ahead. She almost had. She had picked up her phone twice on the cab ride over, started typing Alexander's name, and then stopped herself both times. Because surprising him felt like something a real couple would do. Something easy and comfortable and normal. And she needed normal tonight. She needed him tonight. She had spent the last 6 weeks feeling like she was disappearing, like she was standing in the same room as the man she loved and watching him slowly become someone she didn't recognize, and she had decided that enough was enough. She was going to show up. She was going to reach for him. She was going to remind both of them what they had built together. That was the plan. She told herself that on the elevator. She told herself that walking down the hallway. She was still telling herself that when she used the key he had given her 14 months ago, the small brass key he had pressed into her palm outside a restaurant on her birthday and said, "I want you to always have a way in," and she pushed open the door to his private penthouse office. And the plan ended. It didn't end with a sound. It ended with a stillness. The kind of stillness that tells your body something before your brain catches up. Sophia stood in the doorway, and she took in what was in front of her. And she did not move. She did not scream. She did not drop the bag. She just stood there, while every single story she had told herself about her own life rearranged itself into a shape she didn't recognize. Alexander was there. And Victoria was there. Victoria Hayes. Sophia's closest friend since college. The woman who had been Sophia's maid of honor at her cousin's wedding. The woman Sophia had called from the hospital waiting room when her mother had her procedure. The woman who had sat across from her at brunch 3 days ago looked her in the eye, asked how things were going with Alexander, and said directly, "You two are the real thing, Soph. Don't let anyone tell you different." That woman, there, in Alexander Romano's apartment, not standing in the kitchen, not waiting on the couch, not there by coincidence or accident or any reason Sophia's mind tried to offer her in the half-second before the full truth arrived. Victoria saw Sophia first, and the expression on Victoria's face was not horror. It was not shame. It was a very brief flash of something like irritation, the look of a person whose evening had been interrupted, and then it settled into something worse. Something composed. Something that said, "I knew this moment would come, and I have been ready for it." Alexander turned a second later. He looked at Sophia, and he sighed. Not the sigh of a man who had been caught and was devastated by it. Not the sigh of someone whose world was collapsing. It was the sigh of a man who had been expecting a problem and was now watching it arrive right on schedule. Sophia. Just her name, like a statement, like an item being checked off a list. She found her voice. "You said you loved me." It was the only thing she could say. She had 3 years of words stored up inside her, and that was the only one that came out because it was the one that mattered most. Not "what are you doing?" Not "how could you?" Not "how long?" Just "you said you loved me." Because that was the foundation. That was what she had built everything on. And if that wasn't real, then nothing was real, and she needed to know right now. Alexander crossed the room toward her. Not rushing, not panicked. Moving with that particular Romano composure that she had once found so attractive, the ability to be completely controlled in every situation, and she now understood for the first time that it wasn't strength. It was the absence of feeling. It was a man who had never let anything actually reach him. "We need to talk." "We are talking," she said. "I'm right here. Talk." He glanced back at Victoria. Something passed between them. A look. The kind of look that belongs to two people who have been having a private conversation about you for a very long time. And Sophia felt it hit her in the chest like a physical blow, not because of what they were, but because of how long they must have been what they were without her knowing. "How long?" she said. "Sophia." "How long, Alexander?" He didn't answer immediately. That pause lasted approximately 2 seconds, and it told her everything. A man who has done something once and regrets it answers immediately. A man who has been living a parallel life needs a moment to calculate how much truth is survivable. 7 months. 7 months. 7 months ago, Sophia had thrown Alexander a surprise birthday dinner with his friends. She had spent 2 weeks planning it. She had learned the names of every person he wanted there. She had stayed up the night before making the dessert herself, because he had once mentioned offhand that his grandmother used to make it, and he missed it. 7 months ago. She looked at Victoria. "At my house," she said. "You've been in my house since then. You've sat at my table. You've eaten with me. You've let me tell you things." "Sophia." Victoria's voice was careful, controlled. "I know this hurts, but you have to understand that what Alexander and I have is different from what you two had. His world, the life he actually lives, you were never going to be able to be part of it the way—" "Stop." The word came out flat and absolute, and it cut Victoria off mid-sentence. "Do not explain my relationship to me." Victoria stopped. For just a moment, something flickered in her expression. Not guilt. More like surprise, like she had not expected Sophia to have an edge, and the discovery of it was momentarily disorienting. Alexander stepped closer. His voice dropped into something quieter, something that might have been mistaken for gentleness, if Sophia hadn't now understood that he calculated everything he did. "You don't understand my world, Sophia. You never really did. You're a good person. You work at a charity. You believe in things that in my life those things aren't." "Finish that sentence." He stopped. "I want you to finish it," she said. "I want to hear you say out loud that being a good person is a disqualification. I want to hear you say it." He didn't finish it, because some truths are too ugly, even for people who are willing to live by them. Victoria stood up from the couch and moved toward her with the practiced ease of someone who had decided to take control of the situation. "You were always temporary, Sophia. I don't mean that to be cruel, it's just the reality. Alexander needed someone who understood his world. You were something he wanted when he was trying to be someone different. But he can't be someone different. And you deserve someone who lives in the world you actually live in." Sophia looked at her. She had known Victoria Hayes for 11 years. She had watched her graduate. She had been there when Victoria got the news about her father. She had lent her money. She had forgiven small betrayals, the kind of small betrayals that every long friendship accumulates, because she believed in the friendship itself, believed it was the kind of thing that outlasted damage. 11 years. And Victoria was standing there explaining her own disposal to her with the calm confidence of a woman who had decided the explanation was a kindness. Sophia felt something move through her. Not fury. Something colder. Something that she had never felt before and would spend the next several months learning to recognize as the moment her old self finally let go. She reached up to her neck. The necklace was a thin gold chain with a small diamond pendant that Alexander had given her on their first anniversary. She had worn it almost every day since. She had worn it to her own charity gala. She had worn it to her mother's hospital appointments. She had worn it so consistently that she sometimes forgot it was there. It had simply become part of her. She took it off. She walked to the small table near the door. She set it down. "You're right," she said. Not to Victoria, to Alexander. "I don't belong in your world." Alexander watched her. She couldn't read his expression. She didn't try anymore. "But I will never beg to stay in a place where I'm not respected." She picked up the takeout bag from where she had set it on the floor. She looked at it for a second. She had bought his favorite. She had stood in the rain outside the restaurant for 8 minutes waiting for the order, and the whole time she had been thinking about how she was going to put the food on the table and sit across from him and say, "I miss you. I need us to talk. I think something has been wrong between us and I want to fix it." She set the bag on the table next to the necklace, and she walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Not a slam. A click. The smallest possible sound for the end of 3 years. She pressed the elevator button. She waited. She did not cry. She stood in that hallway, and she breathed slowly and deliberately, and she did not fall apart, and she would not be able to explain later why she didn't. She would only know that something had shifted in the moment she took the necklace off, like she had put down a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. And the grief was there. The grief was absolutely there, but underneath it was something she didn't have a word for yet. The elevator arrived. She stepped in. The doors closed, and she did not see the figure standing at the far end of the corridor. She didn't notice the door that had been cracked open the entire time the study 2 doors down from Alexander's office, where Dante Romano had been conducting a late phone call, when he heard the front door open and a voice he didn't recognize. He had not planned to watch. He had simply stood still and listened, because in his world, information was the only currency that never lost its value, and a man in his position did not ignore things that happened in his own building. But he had watched. He had heard every word. He had watched a woman discover the worst betrayal of her life and respond to it without collapse, without begging, without the performance of grief that people usually put on when they wanted the person who hurt them to feel responsible. She had simply removed the thing he had given her, set it down, and left. Dante Romano had been running a criminal empire for 31 years. He had sat across from senators and judges and men who controlled shipping ports and men who controlled who lived and who didn't. And in 31 years, he had developed a very specific ability to recognize what a person was made of. He stood in the darkened doorway and he watched the elevator close behind Sophia Bennett. And he thought, she has no idea what she is. The morning after. Sophia woke up at 5:43 because she had not slept. She had lain in her bed in her apartment on the Upper West Side in the dark, and she had let herself feel it, the full weight of it, because she had decided somewhere in the elevator that she was not going to run from this. She was going to sit inside it and let it move through her and come out the other side. Her phone had 12 messages, 3 from Alexander. None of them apologies. 2 of them were explanation-shaped things, the kind of messages that start with, "I think you need to understand," rather than, "I'm sorry." The third one told her that the necklace was a family piece, and could she please arrange to return it when she was ready. She read that one twice. 6 from mutual friends who had apparently been told something by someone, because the messages ranged from confused to cautious, to one that said, "I heard what happened, and I just want to say, I always thought you were too good for him anyway," which landed with all the comfort of someone handing you an umbrella after you've already drowned. 3 from numbers she didn't recognize. She ignored all of them. She got up. She made coffee. She showered. She put on clothes. She went to work because the children her organization served needed lunch covered by Friday, and 2 of her volunteers had called out sick, and the world did not stop for personal disasters, and she had never been the kind of person who let personal disasters become the reason other people went without. Her office was small and warm, and smelled like old carpet, and someone's microwaved soup from the break room next door. She sat at her desk, and she opened her email, and she started working through the administrative backlog that had built up while she was dealing with a grant application. And she did not look at Alexander's name in her phone, and she did not call Victoria, and she did not allow herself to sit in the full magnitude of what last night had cost her, because if she opened that door right now, she would not be able to close it again, and people needed lunch covered by Friday. At 10:37, someone knocked on her office door. She called out that it was open. The man who walked in was not anyone she recognized. He was 50 or so, well-dressed in the way that money makes effortless, not showy, not designed to impress, simply expensive in every detail, with dark eyes, and the kind of stillness that her body registered before her brain did, the way you register weather changing before you can name what the air is telling you. He closed the door behind him. He sat down across from her without being invited. He said, "My name is Marco Ricci. I work for Dante Romano. Mr. Romano would like to meet with you. Today, if possible. Tonight at the latest." Sophia put down her pen. She looked at Marco Ricci. She said, "Why?" "He'll explain that himself." "Then tell him to call me." Marco Ricci produced a card from his jacket pocket and placed it on her desk. The card had a number on it. Nothing else. "He prefers in person," he says. And here Marco paused in the way of someone relaying words exactly that what he has to offer you deserves more than a phone call. Sophia looked at the card. She picked it up. She looked at the number. She looked at Marco. "You can tell Dante Romano that I have work to finish today, and that I don't do things because powerful men prefer it. If he wants to meet me, he can tell me what it's about. Through you right now in this office." Marco was quiet for a moment. Then, the faintest thing moved across his expression. Not a smile. More like a recognition. "He said you'd say something like that," Marco told her. "He said to tell you that it concerns his son, and an offer he believes you will want to hear, and that he will send a car at 7 this evening. Whether you get in it is entirely your decision." He stood. He buttoned his jacket. He walked to the door. "He also said to tell you," Marco added without turning around, "that what he watched last night reminded him of someone he hasn't seen in a very long time." He left. Sophia sat in her office. She turned the card over in her fingers. Dante Romano. She knew the name. Everyone in New York knew the name. You didn't navigate this city for 27 years without learning which names you said quietly and which names you didn't say at all in mixed company. Dante Romano was the kind of name that belonged in the second category. The kind of name her mother had always said with a particular tone, not fear exactly, more like the respect you gave to weather systems. Something large enough and old enough that arguing with it was beside the point. He was Alexander's father. The man Alexander almost never talked about. She had met Dante Romano exactly once at a Romano family event 18 months ago that Alexander had brought her to, reluctantly, and spent the entire evening trying to steer her away from conversations she didn't know she wasn't supposed to be having. She had been introduced to Dante briefly, handshake her name a sentence, and she had registered him the way you registered a landmark on a horizon. Large, unmistakable, present. And then Alexander had steered her in another direction, and that was the end of it. She had not thought about Dante Romano again until right now. Until Marco Ricci had walked out of her office and left a card with a single phone number on her desk, and the information that Dante Romano had seen something last night that reminded him of someone he hadn't seen in a long time. She sat with that. What had he seen? He had seen her walk in. He had been there, or nearby, while she discovered what Alexander had done. He had watched her walk out, and something about that had made him send a car. She was not naive. She worked in a city that operated on power dynamics so layered and complicated that you spent your whole career learning to read which ones applied to you at any given moment. She knew that a Mafia patriarch summoning the woman his son had just betrayed did not automatically mean kindness. It could mean any number of things, and several of them were things that a sensible person should be afraid of. She also knew that she was not afraid. She wasn't sure if that was wisdom or shock still talking. She put the card in her desk drawer. She went back to work. At 5 minutes past 7 that evening, a black car was waiting at the curb outside her building. She stood on the sidewalk in the wind and looked at it. And then she got in. Dante Romano's home office did not look like what she had expected. She had expected the visual vocabulary of power, dark wood, displayed wealth, something that announced itself. What she found was a room that felt lived in. Books with broken spines, a desk covered in working papers, a single lamp casting a warm circle of light. A man who looked in this room less like a crime boss and more like someone who had been working very late for a very long time and had simply never stopped. He stood when she came in. He was taller than she remembered, broader. He wore a dark shirt with the cuffs rolled back, no jacket, and he had the kind of face that had earned its lines, not the face of someone who had avoided difficulty, but the face of someone who had walked through it enough times to stop flinching. "Ms. Bennett," he said, "sit down, please." She sat. He sat. He looked at her for a moment without speaking. She met his gaze and didn't look away, and she saw something register in his expression, small, controlled, but there. "You wanted to talk," she said. "Talk." Dante Romano folded his hands on the desk. "I owe you an apology." That was not what she expected. "My son behaved dishonorably. In my home, under my roof. That reflects on me whether I was aware of it or not. I was not aware of it. I want you to know that." Sophia studied him. "Is that what you brought me here to say?" "No." "Then what?" He was quiet for a beat. Not because he was deciding whether to tell her she had the impression that Dante Romano almost never said things he hadn't already decided to say, but because he was choosing the exact shape of it. "I have a proposal for you," he said. "I want you to hear the full version of it before you react to it, because the first version you hear in your head will be wrong." "All right. I want to offer you a marriage." Sophia sat very still. "I want you to marry me." The room was quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic and the particular quality of silence that follows a sentence no one expected. She said, "You want me to marry you?" "Yes." "I'm 27 years old." "I know." "You're 54. You want me to marry you?" "Yes." "Why?" He leaned back slightly, not defensively, more like he was making room for the answer to take its full shape. "Because the woman my son was too small to value," he said, "deserves to stand in a room where her value is recognized. Because what I watched last night told me more about the kind of person you are than any investigation could have. And because," he paused, "my son has spent 3 years learning that consequences in our world do not apply to him. I want him to understand that they do." Sophia heard that. "So it's revenge. It's correction. Those aren't different things. They are, actually. Revenge is about making someone hurt. Correction is about showing them the truth they've refused to see." He looked at her directly. "You are not a weapon in this proposal. You are the reason for it." She shook her head slowly. "You don't know me. I know you run a charity organization that currently has 11 open cases, a Friday lunch gap, and a volunteer shortfall. I know you have a master's degree that you could have used to make considerably more money than you currently make. I know you have a mother who had a health procedure 8 months ago, and you paid for 3 of the follow-up visits yourself because her coverage didn't extend to them. I know you were in a relationship with my son for 3 years, during which time he did not introduce you to a single member of my legitimate business circle because he wanted to keep you separate from his real life. And I know that when you walked out of this building last night, you were carrying takeout food you had bought for him." Sophia's chest tightened. "So yes," Dante said. "I know you. Not everything, but enough." She looked at him. This was the moment she was supposed to stand up. She knew that. This was the moment a reasonable, sensible woman with a good head on her shoulders stood up and said thank you for the conversation, and walked out and went home, and processed this in a normal, sequential way over a normal number of days. She didn't stand up. "What would this marriage actually look like?" she said, and the room shifted, because it was not a yes, but it was not a no. And Dante Romano, who had been waiting for exactly this question, who had been certain since the elevator closed last night that this was the question she would eventually ask, allowed himself the smallest thing that might, from the right angle in certain light, be described as the beginning of respect. "That," he said, "is what I'd like to talk about." She did not say yes that night. She went home, and she did not sleep. And this time, it was not because of Alexander. It was because she was trying to locate the part of herself that should have been disgusted by this conversation, or afraid of it, or outraged by the sheer audacity of what Dante Romano had just proposed, and she could find those reactions. They were available to her, but underneath them was something else, something quieter, something she couldn't fully name yet. She called no one. She sat with it. She thought about what Victoria had said: you were always temporary. You were something he wanted when he was trying to be someone different. She thought about the takeout bag she had left on the table. She thought about the key she still had on her keychain, the small brass one, and how Alexander had not asked for it back, which meant either he didn't care or he hadn't thought about it, and both of those possibilities said the same thing. She thought about the charity. She thought about the 11 families. She thought about Friday. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, in the particular quiet of 4 a.m, she thought about the moment Dante Romano had said, "You are not a weapon in this proposal. You are the reason for it." She didn't know if she believed him. She knew she wanted to find out. She met with him again 2 days later, and then a third time. Each time she asked him a different question. The first time she asked about the families he claimed to protect. He gave her names, addresses, records she could verify. She verified them. The second time she asked about the businesses. He showed her what was legitimate, what wasn't, and where he claimed he wanted to go. She asked why she should believe him. He said, "You shouldn't. Not yet. That's what this period is for." The third time she asked about Alexander. This was the question she had been building toward. "If I say yes," she said, "what happens to him? What happens between you and Alexander because of this?" Dante was quiet for a moment. "He will be angry. I know that. He will feel humiliated. I know. And he will spend a significant period of time believing that this was done to punish him." And was it? Dante looked at her. He needed to learn something he has refused to learn for a long time. That actions have weight. That people have value. That disrespecting someone doesn't make them disappear. It only reveals the size of the person doing the disrespecting. He paused. "Whether that constitutes punishment depends on your definition." Sophia held his gaze. "It's also true," Dante said more quietly, "that I am 54 years old, and I have not had a conversation like these 3 conversations in a very long time. And that is not a small thing. That is not part of any calculation. That is simply the truth." She went home. She sat with it again. She thought about what she was walking toward, and what she was walking away from, and which direction felt more like herself. And 6 days after the elevator doors closed behind her in the Romano building, Sophia Bennett called the number on the card. Dante answered on the second ring. She said, "I have conditions." He said, "Of course you do." She said, "They're not small conditions." He said, "I wouldn't expect them to be." And she sat down at her kitchen table in her small apartment with her cold coffee and her yellow notepad, and she began to tell Dante Romano what it would take. She did not tell anyone for 10 days. The announcement went out on a Friday morning through channels that Sophia did not fully understand, but that Dante's people clearly had mapped precisely, and by Friday afternoon, the city was doing what cities do with information that doesn't fit the stories they already know how to tell. Sophia Bennett, the charity worker, the woman Alexander Romano had been with for 3 years, was marrying his father. Her phone became unmanageable within 2 hours. Former colleagues, acquaintances, people she had not spoken to in years, who had apparently monitored her life enough to have an opinion about this development. Journalists, 2 law professors she had never met, who had some kind of Romano-adjacent interest, and threading through all of it continuous and rising Alexander. Alexander called 14 times on Friday. She did not answer. He sent messages. She read them and did not respond. He sent flowers to her apartment, an enormous arrangement, the kind of extravagant gesture that was more about the impression it made than the feeling behind it. And she looked at the flowers and felt nothing about them except a kind of anthropological interest in the decision-making process that had produced them. On Saturday morning, he showed up. She opened the door because turning away from difficult things had never been her instinct, and because she had decided she was going to stop letting Alexander Romano be a thing, she avoided. He looked different than she expected. Not broken. Not the way she might have imagined in her worst moments that she'd want to see him look. He looked unsettled, like someone whose furniture had all been moved 3 inches in an unexpected direction, and nothing was in the place he reached for it. "You can't do this," he said. "Hello, Alexander?" "I'm serious, Sophia. Whatever he told you, whatever he offered you, you don't know what you're walking into. I know significantly more than you think I do." He stared at her. "He's using you. This is about me. This is him making a point at my expense, and you are the... Don't." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Don't tell me what I am in this situation. Don't explain my own life to me. You gave up the right to narrate my choices when you made yours." Alexander ran a hand through his hair. She had watched him do that gesture hundreds of times. She had found it endearing once. Now it just looked like what it was, a nervous habit, from a man who was accustomed to being able to manage things and had just encountered something he couldn't. 3 years, he said, and his voice changed. Something underneath the composure surfaced briefly. 3 years, Sophia. Doesn't that mean anything? She looked at him. It meant everything, she said. It meant everything to me for 3 years. And that's exactly why I'm not the one who should be standing here right now asking that question. He didn't have an answer for that. She waited. He didn't have one. I hope you find a way to make peace with this, she said, because I'm not going to. I'm not going to keep revisiting this to make it more comfortable for you. You made your choice. I made mine. She closed the door. She stood on the other side of it, and she waited for the devastation to arrive. It didn't. What arrived instead was something calmer and steadier and more frightening in its way, because she didn't have a name for it yet. She went back to her kitchen table. She picked up her coffee. She had work to do. She had made her choice, and the world was still going. The conditions she had written on that yellow notepad were not small. She had told him that on the phone, and she had meant it. And when she sat across from Dante Romano for the 4th time and slid the notepad across the desk, she watched him read through the list without any change in his expression, which told her either that he had expected exactly this, or that he was very good at receiving information without broadcasting his reaction to it. She suspected it was both. The first condition, her charity organization would receive a 5-year operating fund held in a separate account she controlled entirely with no Romano name attached to any documentation. The second, she would continue working. Every day. Her office, her hours, her decisions. Marriage to Dante Romano would not become the thing that absorbed her identity. The third Alexander would not be harmed, humiliated perhaps by the fact of this marriage that was unavoidable, and she had accepted it. But not harmed, not touched, not threatened. The fourth, she would be told the truth. Not everything she was realistic enough to understand, that a man in Dante's position carried information that could not be fully disclosed to anyone but the truth about what she was walking into. The real shape of it, not the version designed to make her comfortable. The fifth, if she ever decided to leave, she could leave. No threats, no complications, no weight applied to that decision in any direction. Dante finished reading. He looked up. The third condition, he said, non-negotiable. I had no intention of harming Alexander. I know. I still needed it in writing. Something moved across his expression, not offense. More like the recognition of a particular kind of clarity, the kind that comes from someone who has learned the hard way that verbal agreements have a shelf life and written ones are longer. All right, he said. All right to all 5. Yes. She looked at him. Just like that. You expected negotiation. I expected at least one objection. He folded his hands. Ms. Bennett, I brought you here because I believe you are the kind of person who knows their own value. Arguing with your conditions would be the first way I could prove I was wrong about that. I have no interest in being wrong about that. She picked up the notepad. She put it in her bag. She said, I have one more thing. Go ahead. I want to know why you haven't done this before. Married again. You've been alone a long time. The room changed slightly. Not in any physical way. Something in the quality of his stillness altered. That, he said, is the most personal question you've asked me. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. My wife died 14 years ago. Her name was Elena. She was the only person in my adult life who told me the truth without calculating the cost of it first. After she died, I spent a long time confusing the absence of someone like her with the absence of the possibility of someone like her. Those aren't the same thing. I understand that now. Sophia held that. I'm not Elena, she said. No, you're Sophia. That's what makes this worth doing. She went home. She made her decision. And she called him at 8 the next morning and said yes. The preparation took 3 weeks. 3 weeks that felt like 3 months, and like 3 days simultaneously, the way time moves when everything around you is changing faster than your nervous system can fully process. Sophia continued going to work every morning. She covered the Friday lunch gap. She managed her 11 cases. She replied to grant applications. And she did all of it while also navigating the reality of what she had agreed to, which meant meetings with lawyers whose hourly rate she did not want to think about, and conversations with Dante's household staff, who needed to understand her preferences and requirements. And one extremely uncomfortable afternoon, during which a woman named Claudine measured her for 3 formal dresses that cost more individually than Sophia's monthly rent, and looked at her the entire time with the professional blankness of someone hired never to have visible opinions. Sophia called her mother on day 6. That conversation lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes and covered in no particular order. Shock, concern, a fairly detailed rehearsal of every story her mother had ever heard about the Romano family. A period of silence. A set of pointed questions that Sophia answered as honestly as she could. Another period of silence, and then finally from her mother a single sentence. You're not doing this to hurt anyone, are you? No, Mom. And you're not doing it because you're hurt. I'm doing it because I looked at the situation and I made a decision. A real one, not a reaction. Her mother was quiet. You sound different, she said. I know. Since when do you sound like that? Sophia thought about it. Since about 9:47 on a Tuesday night, she said. Give or take. Her mother made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a cry, and was something very specific to mothers of daughters who have made choices they don't entirely understand but can see the logic of. Be careful, she said. I will. Call me every Sunday. I will. And Sophia. Yes. If anything ever. Mom, I know. Okay. A breath. Okay. Tell me what you need me to do. That call was the hardest thing about those 3 weeks. Not because her mother was against her. Because her mother was for her, in that fierce, exhausted, unconditional way that only works in one direction, parent to child. And Sophia felt the full weight of being loved like that by someone who couldn't fully protect her from what was coming. And neither of them said that out loud, but both of them knew it. The announcement went out 3 days later, and the city lost its mind. She was not on social media in any serious way, so she heard about it secondhand through the look on her assistant's face when Sophia walked into the office the morning it dropped through the messages, through the 3 journalists who called her organization's main line within 90 minutes of the story going live, through the particular quality of silence that fell over the coffee shop on her corner when she walked in, and 3 separate people looked up from their phones at her. The narrative had already been written by the time she became aware of it. She was ambitious. She had planned this. She had been with Alexander as a way into the Romano family, and now she was upgrading. She was after money. She was naive and being used. She was dangerous. She was a victim. She was a schemer. The story had 17 different versions, and the only thing all of them had in common was that none of them were about Sophia. None of them were about who she actually was, or what she had actually decided, or why. They were all about what she represented in someone else's story, Alexander's story, Dante's story, the Romano family story. A symbol. A move on a board. An object through which other people's dramas were being played out. She read 3 of the articles. She stopped at 3. She went back to her desk. Her assistant, a 23-year-old named Priya, who Sophia had hired 8 months ago, and who had the extraordinary quality of being able to read a room and decide that the correct response was to simply keep working, came in with coffee and a printout of the Friday case files, and said without looking up from her clipboard, "I handled the journalist calls, told them no comment, and the lunch gap is covered through next Wednesday." Sophia looked at her. "Thank you, Priya. The Delgado family needs a follow-up call this afternoon." "I'll do it." "And there's someone in the waiting area. He's been there since 9. He says he's a friend of yours." "He doesn't look like a friend of yours." Priya paused. "He looks like someone's lawyer." Sophia stood up. The man in the waiting area was not a lawyer. He was Marcus Webb, who had been one of Alexander's closest friends since college, and who looked at Sophia with the particular expression of a man who had been sent somewhere he didn't entirely want to go. "Alexander asked me to talk to you," he said. "Alexander can talk to me himself. He thinks you won't listen to him. He's right, but that's not an improvement." Marcus Webb sat down in the chair across from her, the chair where clients sat, the chair where people came to ask for help, and he looked profoundly out of place in it, in his good suit and his careful manner, and something about that struck Sophia as very accurate. "I've known Alex a long time," Marcus said, "and I'm not here to defend what he did. I want to be clear about that." "Good. Then what are you here for?" "He's worried about you. He thinks—" "Marcus!" Her voice was patient, firm, the voice she used with people who were trying to reach her through the most available opening. "Alexander is not worried about me. He's worried about himself. He's worried about what this looks like and what it means for him and how he navigates his family and his world with this new information in it. I understand that. It's a reasonable thing to be worried about, but he doesn't get to dress that concern up as care for me and send it through you. He doesn't get that." Marcus looked at her. "You're different," he said. "People keep saying that. From before. You're different from before." "Yes." He picked up his jacket. He stood. He looked at her one more time with an expression she couldn't fully parse. Something between admiration and unease. The look of someone watching something happen that they knew was significant but couldn't yet categorize. "For what it's worth," he said, "I think he made the worst mistake of his life." "I know," she said. "So does he. That's the problem." Marcus Webb left. Sophia went back to work. She called the Delgado family at 2:15. She covered the lunch gap. She went home. And the world kept moving around her like water around a stone, fast and loud and certain, while she sat inside the certainty of what she had decided and let it hold her. 12 days before the wedding, Dante's world reached into hers in a way she hadn't anticipated. She was walking back to her office from a site visit. One of the families her organization was supporting had a housing issue that needed on-the-ground assessment when a car pulled alongside her at the curb. Not fast, not aggressive, just present. The kind of presence that communicates intention without requiring volume. The window came down. A man she didn't recognize looked at her. He said, "Ms. Bennett, a moment of your time." She kept walking. The car kept pace. "My employer has a message for Mr. Romano. I'd like you to pass it along." "Call his office," she said. "We'd prefer a more direct channel." She stopped. She turned to face the car. The man was 40 maybe, with a careful expression and the kind of eyes that had learned to show nothing. "Who is your employer?" she said. "A business associate. Someone who has concerns about the upcoming change in Mr. Romano's domestic situation. Then tell your business associate to take his concerns to Mr. Romano directly. I'm not a message service." She turned and kept walking. The car sat for a moment. Then it drove away. She called Dante from the sidewalk. He answered immediately. "A man in a black car just attempted to use me as a courier," she said. He said he represented a business associate who has concerns about our wedding. He did not give a name. He was waiting for me outside the Garfield building on 72nd. Silence for 2 seconds. Are you safe right now? Yes, he drove away. I'm on the street. Go back to your office. Don't take the long way. I'll have someone with you within 20 minutes. Dante. This is not negotiable, Sophia. I will explain everything tonight. Go to your office. She went to her office. 22 minutes later, a woman she had never seen before appeared at her door. Tall, composed, somewhere in her late 30s, with the posture of someone whose body has been trained to respond before thinking. My name is Claire, she said. Mr. Romano sent me. Sophia looked at her. Sent you to do what exactly? Stay close, Claire said. Until further notice. Sophia looked at her for a long moment. Then she turned back to her desk. Fine, she said. Do you drink coffee? Claire blinked. Excuse me? Coffee. Do you drink it? Because if you're going to be here, you're going to sit in that chair and you're going to be a person. Not a shadow, a person. So, coffee. A pause. Yes, Claire said. Please. That was the beginning of the conversation that lasted in pieces across the next several days, that became the first thing in Sophia's new life that felt genuinely unexpected, not in a threatening way, but in the way that reminded her the world was larger than the stories available to describe it. Claire did not discuss her employer's business. She deflected questions about the Romano organization with a professionalism that Sophia respected even when it frustrated her. But she was underneath the professional composure, a person with a dry sense of humor that surfaced in small moments, and a history she indicated without fully disclosing, and an obvious intelligence that made the confined role she occupied feel slightly too small for her. How long have you worked for him? Sophia asked on day 2. 7 years. Is he a good employer? Claire considered this with the care of someone who understood that questions like this had multiple possible interpretations. He is fair, she said finally. He is demanding, he is consistent, and he has never asked me to do anything I was not able to live with afterward. Sophia held that. That last part, she said. Is that a high bar in your world? It is a higher bar than most people would guess, Claire said. That night, Dante came to her apartment for the first time. He sat at her kitchen table, her small, ordinary kitchen table in her apartment with its old carpet and its bookshelves and its window overlooking the street, and he told her the truth. Or as much of it as he had agreed to tell her, and she suspected it was more than he told most people, because she could see the weight of it in the way he carried the information forward. The man in the car worked for a family called the Breckenridge Operation. They were not old money in the criminal sense. They were a second-generation organization that had spent the last decade trying to move into territory the Romano family had held for decades. They had made 2 attempts at direct confrontation in the past 6 years, and both had failed. Now they had changed strategy. They want to use me, Sophia said. It was not a question. They want to use the marriage. They believe correctly that a public change in my domestic situation creates a period of attention, of scrutiny, of distraction. They would like to make something happen during that period. And the message in the car was a test. They wanted to see how you would respond, whether you were someone who could be leveraged. And you called me immediately. He looked at her. That was the correct answer. She leaned back in her chair. She was quiet for a moment. When you proposed this marriage, she said, did you know this would happen? I expected something like this. Not this specific, but the general shape of it. And you proposed it anyway. Yes. Without telling me. Without knowing the specifics yet. And, he stopped. And what? He looked at her. And because I believed you were the kind of person who, when told the specifics, would not run from them. You were gambling. I was making an informed assessment. Dante, you were gambling with my safety. He didn't look away. Yes, I was. And if that changes your decision, I will honor the 5th condition. Without question. No consequences. Sophia sat very still. She thought about the man in the car. She thought about his careful eyes and the particular quality of the silence after she told him to call the office himself. She thought about the fact that she had not been afraid. She had been calibrating, reading the situation, processing it the way she processed difficult cases at work with attention and without drama. She thought about what Dante had just said. I believed you were the kind of person who would not run. I need you to tell me everything from now on, she said. Not the version designed to manage me, everything that concerns me, immediately. Do you understand? Yes. That's a new condition. Noted. I'm not running. Something shifted in his expression. It was small and contained, and very real. I know, he said. She poured him coffee. They talked for 3 more hours. By the time he left, she understood 3 things she hadn't understood before. First, that the Breckenridge problem was real, but not as large as the city's underworld would have her believe. Dante had resources and connections that made the threat manageable if handled correctly. Second, that Dante had been managing threats alone, without a confidant, without anyone in his personal life who knew the full picture for longer than she had been alive, and that this had not made him less capable, but it had made him in ways both obvious and subtle, profoundly isolated. Third, that the marriage she had agreed to was not going to be the thing she thought it was. She wasn't sure yet what it was going to be, but she was sure it was going to be real. The wedding was held on a Saturday in a room she had not chosen but had modified. She removed 6 of the floral arrangements, replaced 2 of the table configurations, and asked that the guest list be trimmed from the 120 Dante's people had assembled to 60, on the grounds that she was not going to begin her marriage surrounded by people she had never met, who were attending out of obligation or strategy. Dante agreed to all of it. That might have been the most surprising thing about the 3 weeks of preparation, actually. Not the security detail, not the lawyers, not the city's noise about who she was and what she wanted. The most surprising thing was how consistently Dante said yes when she expected resistance. She had spent 3 years with a man who negotiated everything, who framed every disagreement as a conversation about what she needed to understand, who returned every conflict to a position where his assessment of the situation was presented as the one most accurately aligned with reality. She had not fully understood, until she was out of it, how exhausting that had been. Dante said yes. He said yes in the way of someone who had thought carefully about the terms of an agreement and had no interest in revising them once made. He said yes in the way of someone who understood that the value of a decision was in honoring it, not in renegotiating it every time the cost became apparent. She stood at the front of the room on a Saturday morning, in a dress she had helped choose, and she listened to words being said. And she was very aware of being completely present in her own life in a way she had not been for a long time. Alexander arrived 20 minutes before the ceremony. She heard him before she saw him. A raised voice in the corridor, the sound of someone accustomed to being admitted everywhere, being told that this particular space required a different kind of permission. Claire appeared at Sophia's side without being summoned. He's outside, Claire said. He wants... I know what he wants. Do you want me to? No. Sophia looked at herself in the mirror on the wall. She looked different than she had looked 3 weeks ago. Not physically, but in some quality of the way she occupied her own face. Let him come in. Give us 2 minutes. Alexander came in. He looked at her. For a moment nothing was said. She watched him take in the dress, the room, the reality of what was about to happen, watched it move through him like something physical. Sophia. His voice was lower than usual. Please. Alexander. This is just, listen to me. Whatever he told you, I know you're angry. I know you have every right to be angry, but this is not the answer. It's not an answer to anything you did, she said. It's not about you. It's my father. I know who it is. How can you? He stopped, pressed his hands together, tried again. What we had. 3 years. Whatever happened, whatever I did, you know it was real. You know it wasn't. I know it was real, she said. I know it was real for me. For 3 years I was completely in it. Completely committed. Completely. She stopped herself. And you were planning your exit the entire last 7 months of it. So yes, it was real. And yes, I loved you. And yes, it mattered. And I am standing here today anyway, not because of you, because of me. He looked at her, and for the first time since the night in his apartment, she saw something genuine in his expression, not the managed presentation, not the calculated composure. Something raw and unshielded, and too late. I didn't know what I had, he said. No, she said. You didn't. She turned back to the mirror. 2 minutes are up, she said. I need you to go. He stood there for a moment longer, then he left. She did not watch him go. She looked at herself in the mirror, and she breathed slowly in through her nose and out through her mouth, and she let herself feel the grief of it. One more time, the real grief, the honest grief, the grief of loving someone and losing them, not to death or to circumstance, but to the discovery that they were never quite who you believed, and she let it move through her, and it moved through her, and she was still standing. Claire appeared quietly at the door. It's time. Sophia straightened. She walked out. 60 people stood when she entered the room. She didn't see most of them. She saw Dante at the front, standing with the particular stillness she had already learned to read as something other than coldness. It was presence. She understood now the quality of someone who was entirely where they were. He looked at her, and in his expression, she saw the thing she had been watching for across 4 conversations and 3 weeks and 1 very long assessment of her own judgment. He saw her. Not the symbol, not the correction. Not the woman his son had underestimated. Her. She walked forward. The ceremony was short and concrete, and she was present for every word of it. Afterward, in the reception, surrounded by 60 people she mostly didn't know, Dante leaned slightly toward her and said quietly, so only she could hear, "You looked like you were deciding something walking in." "I was," she said. "What were you deciding?" She looked at him. "Whether I was doing this because of what I was leaving," she said, "or because of what I was walking toward." And, "Toward," she said. "Definitely toward." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Good." That was the whole conversation. It was enough. 3 hours into the reception, a man Sophia didn't recognize appeared at the edge of the room and caught Dante's eye with a look that said, what certain looks in certain rooms say that something had changed. That information had arrived, that the managed calm of a social event was about to encounter the unmanaged reality of the world outside it. Dante excused himself for 7 minutes. When he came back, his expression was exactly as controlled as it had always been. But she had been watching him for 3 weeks. She knew the difference. She waited until they were briefly alone at the edge of the room. "What happened?" she said. He looked at her. "The Breckenridge people made a move," he said. "What kind of move?" "Not at us directly, not yet, but they went after your organization. They approached 2 of your largest donors this morning with information, or what they're presenting as information, about the marriage, about you, designed to make your donors question their relationship with your charity." Sophia went very still. "Which donors?" he told her. She knew both names. One had been supporting her organization for 4 years. The other had come in 8 months ago and tripled their contribution. "Did it work?" she said. "We don't know yet." She thought about the Delgado family. She thought about 11 open cases. She thought about Friday lunches and volunteer shortfalls, and her mother's voice on the phone saying, "Be careful." She looked at Dante. "Fix it," she said. His expression shifted. "Sophia, whatever they told those donors, correct it. I don't care how. I don't care what resources it takes or whose calls get made. My organization helps families, real families, people who have nothing to do with the Romano name or the Breckenridge operation or any of this. They don't get to be collateral. Fix it." Dante looked at her for a long moment, and then something happened in his expression that she had not seen before. Not calculation, not assessment, but something closer to recognition. The look of a man who has spent decades in a world where power is the only language, encountering someone who had just spoken it fluently for the first time, without any awareness that she had. "I'll handle it tonight," he said. "Tonight," she said. "Not tomorrow." "Tonight." She turned back to the room. Her organization was not going to become a casualty of other people's wars. She had not agreed to that. She had not agreed to that at all. And somewhere in the decision to say "fix it," somewhere in the absolute certainty with which she had said it, with which she had meant it, with which she had looked at the most powerful man in the room and expected to be heard, Sophia Bennett understood something new about herself. The woman who had placed a necklace on a table 3 weeks ago and walked out of a building without screaming had not been performing strength. She had been discovering it, and she was only at the beginning. Dante fixed it. She didn't ask him exactly how. She had learned in the first 3 weeks of knowing him that there was a category of questions whose answers would require a context she wasn't ready for yet, and she was not the kind of person who asked questions she wasn't prepared to sit inside the full answer to. What she knew was that by Sunday morning, both donors had called her directly. One of them apologized for the fact that she had heard anything at all. The other said only that he remained fully committed and that she should not worry about outside noise. Neither of them mentioned the Breckenridge name. Neither of them mentioned Dante. The calls were clean and brief and landed with the particular quality of things that have been handled by someone who knows how to handle things. She thanked both of them. She hung up. She sat in the kitchen of the house she had moved into, Dante's house, which was not at all the word she would have chosen for a building that size, but which she was determined to make feel like something other than a museum of power. And she drank her coffee, and she thought about what it meant that the problem had disappeared overnight. It meant she had resources now that she had never had before. It also meant those resources came from a world that operated by rules she was still learning to read. Both of those things were true at the same time, and she was going to have to live inside that complexity without pretending it resolved cleanly in either direction. Claire knocked on the kitchen doorframe at 8:15. "Mr. Romano would like breakfast with you this morning, if you're available." Sophia looked up. "Tell him I'm in the kitchen." A pause. He usually eats in the east dining room." "Tell him I'm in the kitchen," she said again. "He can join me here, or he can eat alone." Another pause. Then, "Yes, ma'am." Dante arrived 4 minutes later. He looked at the kitchen, the small table, the 2 mugs, the ordinary domestic geometry of it, with an expression she was beginning to recognize as the one he wore when something was different from what he expected. He sat down. She poured him coffee without asking. He accepted it without comment. "The donors are settled," he said. "I know, they called." "Good. What did it cost?" He looked at her over the rim of the mug. "What do you mean?" "I mean nothing in your world happens without a cost. What did fixing that cost?" He set down the mug. "Nothing that affects you." "Dante." Some relationships that were already complicated became slightly more complicated. Nothing irreversible. Nothing that changes any immediate equation. She held his gaze. "I need you to understand something. Those families my organization supports, they are not bargaining chips. Not now, not ever. If protecting them ever requires me to understand what's happening, I need to be told. Even if the information is uncomfortable." "I understand. Do you—" "Sophia." He said her name quietly and directly, the way she had noticed he said things he meant entirely. "I do not make the same mistake twice. You told me what you needed. I heard you." She looked at him. Then she nodded. They ate breakfast in the kitchen at the small table while the rest of the house operated at its usual controlled distance around them. And it was ordinary in a way that felt slightly improbable. 2 people who had made an unusual agreement, eating eggs and drinking coffee on a Sunday morning, while the city outside made its weekend sounds, and Sophia noticed that the improbability of it did not make it uncomfortable. That was interesting. She filed it away. The first month of the marriage was not what the city thought it was. The city, or at least the particular stratum of the city that paid attention to Romano family movements, imagined something theatrical. A power display. A young woman learning to navigate a dangerous world. A mafia king parading his reclaimed authority. The tabloid version, the story that fit the available vocabulary. The reality was quieter and stranger and considerably more work. Sophia still went to her office every day. She still managed her cases. She still covered Friday lunches and grant applications and volunteer coordination. The difference was that now she also came home to a house full of people who worked for Dante's staff security people, moving through corridors, on errands she didn't always understand, and she had to negotiate her own presence in a space that had been organized entirely around someone else's life for a long time. She changed things gradually, not dramatically, not in the way of someone asserting territory, in the way of someone who was going to live somewhere and needed it to be livable. She moved a reading chair. She brought her own books and put them on the shelf in the sitting room, alongside the expensive untouched volumes that had been there for years. She asked the kitchen staff what they actually knew how to cook, as opposed to what they had been instructed to serve, and she reorganized dinner accordingly. She established that Sunday mornings meant the kitchen table, and not the dining room. And after the third week, this had become something that did not require negotiation. Dante simply appeared in the kitchen on Sunday mornings, and she poured his coffee, and they talked. Those Sunday morning conversations became the most important thing she had not expected. The first time they talked about Elena, it was 3 weeks in, and it happened accidentally. She asked him something about a photograph she had seen in the study, a woman with dark hair and a direct expression, and he answered without deflecting, and the conversation that followed lasted 2 hours, and covered things that she suspected had not been spoken out loud in a very long time. She didn't tolerate my world, he said. She tolerated me. There's a difference. What's the difference? She never pretended that what I did was acceptable. She never made peace with it. But she said she believed that I was more than what I did. That the thing that had gotten its hands on me wasn't the entirety of me. He was quiet for a moment. I'm not sure I believed that myself until very recently. What changed? He looked at her. She didn't push it. She had learned that Dante Romano answered questions at the pace he was ready to answer them, and that pressing produced not more information, but simply more careful information versions of honesty that were technically accurate but architecturally designed. She was learning to wait for the unarchitected version. You told me to fix it, he said finally. On our wedding night, when I told you what they'd done to your donors. You looked at me and you said, fix it with exactly the certainty you'd use to tell someone to answer the door. No performance. No awareness that you were talking to someone most people are afraid to talk to that way. He paused. Elena used to do that. I had forgotten what it felt like to be spoken to like a person who could choose to do better. Sophia was quiet for a moment. I'm not trying to be Elena, she said. I know, I just told you the thing it reminded me of, not what it was. She nodded slowly. Dante, can I ask you something direct? Yes. Are you lonely? The question sat in the air between them. He looked at her with the expression of someone who has been asked something that has a real answer, but whose real answer has not been fully examined in a long time. I have not thought about it in those terms, he said. I have been occupied for a long time. There has always been something requiring attention. That's not the same as not lonely. No, he said, it's not. She looked at him. Me too, she said. For the last 7 months of being with Alexander, I was lonely in a way I couldn't explain because I was technically in a relationship. I kept thinking something was wrong with me. Nothing was wrong with you. I know that now. He picked up his coffee. We are a strange pair, he said. Yes, she said. We are. Something eased between them in that moment. Not dramatically, not with any announcement. Just a small thing that had been held carefully began to be held slightly less carefully, and both of them noticed it, and neither of them said anything about it. And that was exactly right. The first real crisis hit at the end of week 5. She was at her office when Priya appeared in her doorway with an expression that Sophia had not seen on her before, tight and controlled in the way of someone managing the velocity of bad news. "There's a woman here," Priya said. "She won't give her name. She says she knows you. She says it's urgent." Sophia looked up. "What does she look like?" Priya described her. Sophia went still. "Send her in," she said. Victoria Hayes walked into Sophia's office for the first time in 5 weeks, looking nothing like the composed certain woman who had stood in Alexander's apartment and explained Sophia's own life to her. She looked like someone who had not slept well in a significant number of consecutive nights. She looked like someone whose architecture had been under strain for a while and was showing it. Sophia did not stand up. "Sit down," she said. Victoria sat. For a moment, she said nothing. She looked around the office, the case files, the children's artwork. Her clients had given her the ancient coffee maker in the corner, and she seemed to be assembling something. "I heard about the marriage," she said finally. "Everyone did." "Sophia." "Why are you here, Victoria?" "Because I'm scared." Sophia looked at her. She did not soften and she did not harden. She simply waited. "Alexander," Victoria said. Something is wrong with him. Since the wedding I can't reach him. Not the way I used to. He's angry in a way that's—" She stopped, pressed her lips together, tried again. "He did something last week. I don't know exactly what, but his people were asking me questions. His people, not Dante's, asking me where Alexander had gone on Tuesday night, asking me who he had spoken to, asking in a way that meant something had happened, and they needed to contain it." Sophia stayed very still. "What kind of something?" "I don't know. I genuinely don't know. But one of the men who came to ask me, he wasn't careful enough, and I heard him say the Breckenridge name." The Breckenridge name. Sophia felt the cold precision of that arrive. "Why are you telling me?" she said. Victoria looked at her, and in her eyes was something Sophia had not expected to find there, not strategy, not calculation, but something raw and frightened and genuinely small. "Because I think he's going to do something that gets him hurt," Victoria said. "And I think the only person who can stop it is you. Or Dante. But he won't listen to Dante and I—" She stopped. Her voice was very controlled, but the effort was visible. "I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything. I know exactly what I did and what it cost you, and I know I told myself stories about it that I have stopped being able to tell myself since you walked out that night without—" She stopped again. Sophia waited. "You didn't fall apart," Victoria said quietly. "I expected you to fall apart. You always—" "I had told myself that you needed protecting. That you were too, that the world would break you if you didn't have someone to—" She shook her head. "I had told myself that story for so long that I used it to justify everything. And then you walked out without screaming, and you placed that necklace down, and you left, and I stood there, and I thought I have been completely wrong about who she is. For a very long time." The room was quiet. Sophia looked at her oldest friend, or the woman who had been her oldest friend. She thought about 11 years. She thought about her mother's surgery. She thought about the brunch 3 days before the night in Alexander's apartment, Victoria looking at her across the table and saying, "You two are the real thing." She thought about all of it, and she made a decision. "I'm going to tell you something," she said, "and I want you to hear it clearly." Victoria waited. "What you did to me is not something I have finished being hurt by. I don't know when I will finish. That's honest. That's where I am." She paused. "But you came here because you're afraid for him. And whatever you did to me, I believe you about that fear. So I'm going to tell Dante what you told me, and I'm going to do it because Alexander getting hurt helps no one, not because I forgive you, and not because we're okay. We are not okay. Do you understand the difference?" Victoria's eyes were very bright. "Yes," she said. "Good." "Sophia." "We're done for today," Sophia said. Not unkindly, but with absolute finality. "Leave your number with Priya." Victoria left. Sophia sat at her desk for 3 minutes without moving. Then she picked up her phone and called Dante. He answered on the first ring. Alexander made contact with the Breckenridge operation, she said. A pause so brief it was barely there. Tell me everything, he said. She told him what Victoria had said, word for word as close as she could reconstruct it. She had a memory for conversations she always had. It was something her mother had noticed when she was a child, and something that had served her in her work, in ways she couldn't always explain. When she finished, Dante was quiet for 4 seconds. Come home, he said. I have 3 more cases to Sophia. Come home. His voice was not panicked. Dante Romano's voice, she had already understood, was never panicked. But there was something in it now, a particular quality of controlled urgency that she had not heard before. I'll be there in 40 minutes, she said. She told Priya she was leaving. She did not explain. Priya, who had developed a remarkable ability to accept the unpredictable edges of Sophia's life without visible strain, simply confirmed the afternoon messages and asked if she needed anything. Handle the Delgado call if it comes in, Sophia said. Tell them I'll reach out by Thursday. Done. Claire appeared at the building entrance before Sophia reached the bottom of the stairs. The 40-minute drive took 26. When she walked through the door, Dante was already in his study, and there were 2 men she recognized as part of his inner organization standing near the wall, and the quality of the room told her immediately that what she had passed along had connected with something he already knew. Sit down, he said. She sat. Alexander met with a man named Curtis Webb 3 days ago, not Marcus Webb, his cousin. Curtis Webb has been brokering between independent operators and the Breckenridge family for 2 years. This meeting was not something Alexander cleared with anyone in this organization. It was not sanctioned. It was not disclosed. What did they talk about? We believe Alexander offered them information. Operational information about this family. In exchange for... Dante stopped. For what? We are still determining that. Sophia looked at him. She looked at the 2 men near the wall. She looked back at Dante. He's trying to hurt you, she said. He's trying to restore what he believes he lost. He's going to get himself killed. That is the risk he is taking without fully understanding it. She stood up. Both men near the wall shifted almost imperceptibly, not threatening, but present in the way of people whose job was to track movement. What are you going to do? She said. Handle it. That is not an answer. Sophia. The 3rd condition, she said. Not harmed. You agreed, in writing. I remember the condition. Then tell me what handling it means. Dante looked at her. He looked at the 2 men. He made a very small gesture and they moved toward the door and out of it. And then it was just the 2 of them. And he stood up, and he was very tired. In a way she had not seen before, not physically, but somewhere older than physical. It means I talk to him, Dante said, before anyone else does. It means I get to him first, and I tell him what he has done and what it costs, and I give him the opportunity to understand the size of the mistake before it becomes something that cannot be managed. And if he doesn't listen, he will listen. How do you know? Because I am his father, Dante said quietly. And he is angry, and he is humiliated, and he is making decisions from that place, which means he hasn't thought clearly since the wedding. When I sit in front of him, he will think clearly. He will see what he has done. Sophia looked at him. She believed him, not because she was certain he was right about Alexander. She wasn't certain at all. But because she believed that Dante believed it, and because she could see that the belief came from somewhere real, from a father who had watched his son become someone he didn't recognize, and had been failing to reach him for longer than the past 5 weeks. Go tonight, she said. I was going to go tomorrow. Tonight, Dante. If Victoria knew enough to come to me, other people know enough to move first. He looked at her. 3 seconds. Tonight, he said. He left at 9. She did not sleep. She sat in the kitchen with her tea and her yellow notepad, and she wrote nothing on the notepad because there was nothing to organize and no plan to make. There was only the waiting. And she had never been good at waiting, but she was learning that some situations did not offer alternatives. Claire sat nearby. She had stopped pretending that her presence was purely professional some time ago. She sat with her own coffee, and she was quiet, in the way of someone who understood that silence was sometimes the only useful thing. At 11:43, Sophia said, "How bad is it?" Actually, Claire considered the question with the careful honesty of someone who had decided Sophia deserved accurate information and was working out how much of it she could provide. "The Breckenridge operation is not small," Claire said. "But they have made the mistake more than once of underestimating what this family's reach looks like at full extension. What Alexander did, it's not a disaster. It's a complication. The difference between those two things is time." "How much time?" "Enough if tonight goes well." "And if it doesn't?" Claire wrapped both hands around her mug. "Then tomorrow is a different kind of day." Sophia looked at her. "Do you think he'll listen, Alexander?" Claire was quiet for a moment. "I think he's in a lot of pain," she said carefully. "And I think pain makes people do things that their better selves would prevent. Whether there's enough of his better self accessible tonight?" She stopped. "I don't know." Sophia nodded. She looked at the clock. She thought about Alexander at 23, when she had first met him, before she knew the Romano name meant anything specific, when he was just a man at a friend's dinner party who had sat across from her and argued with her about a book for 45 minutes, and then asked for her number in a way that was slightly awkward and completely sincere. She thought about what he had been trying to be then. The man he had wanted to be before the weight of what he'd been born into had pressed him back into its shape. She thought about Dante saying he is angry and humiliated and making decisions from that place. She understood something then that she hadn't understood before. The Romano men, both of them, in their very different ways, had been in cages for a long time. The cages were beautiful, and the cages were powerful, and the cages were inherited, and neither of them had ever fully believed that someone could look at the cage and the man inside it and choose the man. That was what Elena had done for Dante. That was what Sophia had accidentally started doing too. And Alexander, who had never had that, who had watched his father be loved that way, and had never received it himself, who had built walls and managed people and run from intimacy in exactly the way that people run from things they desperately want and don't believe they deserve. Alexander had found Sophia and tried to be someone different and failed, and the failure had been catastrophic. And now he was making it worse in the way of people who don't know how to stop. She felt something move through her. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever in its entirety. But understanding. Which was different, and which was its own kind of heavy. Dante returned at 2:17 in the morning. She heard him come in. She heard the particular sequence of sounds that meant he had come straight to the kitchen, and she stayed at the table and waited. He sat down across from her. He looked tired in a way she had not seen him look before. "He listened," he said. She let out a breath she had been holding. "He's angry," Dante continued. "He is going to be angry for a long time, but he heard me. He understood what he had put in motion and what it costs, and he has agreed to stand down." A pause. "He also—" He stopped. "What?" Dante looked at the table for a moment. "He asked about you," he said. "He asked if you were—" Another pause. "He asked if you were happy." Sophia was very still. "What did you tell him?" Dante looked at her. Something moved across his face that she had been learning to recognize as the look of a man being honest about something that required effort. "I told him the truth," Dante said. "I told him I didn't know yet, that we were still learning each other, but that you had made the organization's donors whole in 48 hours, and reorganized the kitchen menu, and moved a reading chair into the sitting room, and had Sunday breakfast at the kitchen table every week, and that those things told me the kind of person you were, but not yet everything about whether you were happy." She looked at him. "That is a very careful answer," she said. "I am a careful man." "Dante." He met her eyes. "Are you?" she asked. "Happy?" He was quiet for a long moment. The kind of quiet that Sophia had learned did not mean evasion. It meant the question had landed somewhere real, and he was locating the honest answer rather than the available one. "I am less alone than I have been in 14 years, he said. "Whether that is happiness or the beginning of it or something adjacent to it, I am not yet qualified to say." She nodded. "Fair," she said. She stood up. She put both mugs in the sink. She looked at him. "The Breckenridge problem," she said. "It's not finished." "No." Alexander standing down removes one variable. There are others. Then we deal with the others. Sophia. "We," she said. Not loudly, just clearly. He looked at her for a long time. "We," he said. She went to bed. She lay in the dark and she thought about the word she had just used, and the weight of it, and the fact that she had meant it without calculation, or performance, or any awareness that she was saying something significant until it was already said. She had said "we," and it had felt accurate. She fell asleep. The morning brought 3 things she hadn't anticipated. The first was a message from Priya that 2 new families had been referred to the organization through a community health network that Sophia had been trying to connect with for 8 months. A connection that had finally materialized, according to the network coordinator, following a conversation with a donor who had spoken very highly of the organization's integrity and leadership. Sophia read that twice. She knew without asking which donor. She knew without asking who had made that conversation happen. She didn't ask. She called the community health network back and set up the intake meetings. The second thing was a call from a number she didn't recognize that turned out to be a man named Richard Hale, who introduced himself as a senior attorney for the Breckenridge organization and who spoke in the careful, measured tones of a man whose job was to have conversations that could not later be accurately characterized as threats. "Mrs. Romano," he said, "I'm calling on behalf of my client to express that recent events have created some unfortunate tensions that my client would prefer to resolve through dialogue rather than escalation." "I'm not a dialogue channel," she said. "My husband has attorneys. Call them." "My client is specifically requesting a direct conversation with you." "Why?" "Because," Hale said carefully, "my client has come to understand that you have an unusual degree of influence over certain decisions within the Romano organization, and my client believes that a conversation with you directly might be more productive than a conversation with the established channels." Sophia sat with that for exactly 2 seconds. "Tell your client," she said, "that I am a charity worker. I run an organization that serves families in need. I don't conduct negotiations on behalf of my husband or his business. If your client has something to say to the Romano organization, the Romano organization has attorneys. Use them." She paused. "And tell your client that approaching me directly instead of going through established channels suggests that the established channels are not working in his favor, which is information he probably already has. So this call was not necessary." She hung up. She sat for a moment. Then she called Dante. "Richard Hale just called me," she said. A pause. "Hale." His voice went very quiet. "What did he want?" "A dialogue, apparently. He said his client believes I have unusual influence over your decisions, and that a conversation with me would be productive." "What did you say?" "I told him to use the established channels, and I told him that calling me instead of them suggests the established channels aren't working in his favor." Silence. "Dante." "Yes. Is that accurate, that I have influence over your decisions?" Another pause, shorter. "You have," he said carefully, "a perspective that I find myself weighing more than I anticipated when we made this arrangement." That's a very long way of saying yes. "It is." She absorbed that. "Okay," she said. "Then the Breckenridge people calling me directly is going to become a tactic they try again. I need to know how to handle it." "You handled it correctly just now." "I handled it instinctively. That's not the same thing. I need to understand the landscape, all of it, not the managed version." The pause that followed was the longest she had heard from him. I'll arrange a proper conversation, he said. Tonight. Good. Sophia. I'm not frightened, she said. I'm not asking because I'm frightened. I'm asking because I am living inside this situation, and I intend to navigate it intelligently, and I cannot do that from partial information. I know that. Do you? Yes, he said. That's precisely why the call frightened me. She held that. It frightened you, she repeated. Yes. Why? Because, he said, they have identified you, and people they identify. He stopped. Tonight. We talk tonight. Tonight, she agreed. She hung up. She sat at her desk. The third thing that morning was the one she had not seen coming. It arrived not as a phone call or a message, but as a person, a young woman, maybe 20, who walked into Sophia's organization's waiting room and asked for her by name, and gave her name as Mia, and who Priya brought back to Sophia's office with the particular look that meant Priya had made an assessment, and the assessment was that this required Sophia directly. The young woman sat down. She was nervous in the way of someone who had decided to do something difficult before the fear could fully arrive, and was now sitting inside the consequences of that decision. You don't know me, she said. My name is Mia Romano. I'm Alexander's sister. I'm 21, and I need to talk to you. Sophia looked at her. She knew Alexander had a younger sister. She had known this in the abstract the same way she had known various Romano family facts in the abstract during 3 years of being carefully kept at the perimeter of that world. She had never met her. Alexander had never introduced them. All right, Sophia said. Mia looked at her directly. She had her father's eyes, that quality of seeing clearly and showing it only selectively. I know about what Alexander did, Mia said. The Breckenridge contact. I know. Because Alexander told me, not my father, not anyone in the organization me. Because he needed someone to tell, and he had run out of other options. Sophia waited. He didn't do it to hurt my father, Mia said. I know that's what it looks like. But Alexander, he's been trying to get out of this family's business for 10 years. For 10 years, he has been trying to find a way to walk away, and every time he gets close, something pulls him back. And when the thing that pulled him back this time was you, when he realized that what he had with you was something he could have used to actually build a life outside all of this. Her voice broke slightly. She steadied it. When he realized what he'd done to that, he stopped thinking clearly. He stopped thinking at all. And the Breckenridge approach felt like, I don't know. Proof that he was his father's son. That the world didn't have another place for him. Sophia looked at this young woman sitting across from her. She thought about what Dante had said, he is angry and humiliated and making decisions from that place. She thought about what she herself had understood alone in the kitchen the night Dante had gone to find Alexander, that both Romano men had been in cages for a long time. Why are you telling me this? She said. Because my father will fix the problem, Mia said. He always fixes the problem. But he fixes it the way our world fixes things, and Alexander will go along with it because he doesn't have another option right now, and in 3 years, he'll be exactly where he is today. Trapped. Unless there's someone who... She stopped. She looked at Sophia with her father's eyes. He needs a way out, she said. A real one. And you are the only person in this family's world right now who has credibility with my father and no stake in keeping Alexander inside it. The room was very quiet. Sophia understood exactly what Mia was asking. She understood the size of it. She also understood something else. Something about the kind of life she had walked into and what it was going to require of her if she was going to live in it with the integrity she had demanded on that yellow notepad. She looked at Mia Romano. How long can you stay? She said. Mia blinked. What? How long can you stay? I'm going to make coffee, and you're going to tell me everything about your brother that he would never tell me himself. And then we're going to figure out what a real way out actually looks like. Can you stay? Mia stared at her. And then something shifted in her face, the particular shift of someone who has been carrying something very heavy for a long time and has just been offered without warning a place to set it down. Yes, she said. I can stay. Sophia stood up. She went to the ancient coffee maker in the corner. Outside her window, the city moved at its indifferent pace, full of stories it didn't know. It was inside, full of people navigating worlds they hadn't planned to enter, full of choices being made, in small offices and kitchen tables, and the back seats of cars in the rain. And in a charity office on the Upper West Side, the woman who had placed a necklace on a table 6 weeks ago and walked away from the life she had planned was now standing at a coffee maker and beginning to understand what the life she was meant to have might actually cost her. It cost more than she had priced it. She had known that from the beginning. She was only now learning what she was willing to pay. Mia stayed for 3 hours. She talked the way people talk when they have been waiting a long time for someone to ask the right question. Not in organized chapters. Not in a sequence that made clean narrative sense, but in the real way, where the important things surface between the less important things, and you have to pay attention to know which is which. Sophia paid attention. She learned that Alexander had started trying to exit the Romano business at 19, the year their mother died. That he had made 3 separate attempts over 12 years, each one stalled by a different mechanism. A family crisis the first time, a debt structure, the second time, and the third time 4 years ago by Dante himself, who had told Alexander in a conversation that neither of them had ever fully recovered from, that the family needed him in position for 3 more years. And then they would talk about what came next. The 3 years had stretched. The conversation about what came next had never happened. He blamed my father, Mia said. Not without reason. But he became someone who blamed my father for everything, including the things that were his own choices. And those 2 things got tangled up and he stopped being able to tell them apart. And you, Sophia said. What do you want? Mia looked at her. I want to study architecture. In Boston. I've been accepted to a program for 2 years. I defer every year because... She stopped. Because leaving feels like abandoning something. I don't know exactly what. Your family. What's left of it? Sophia looked at this 21-year-old woman with her father's eyes and her mother's name on a photograph in a study she had started to make into a place she could live in, and she felt the full weight of what the Romano family carried. Not the power, not the money, not the danger, but the specific gravity of a family that had organized itself around a patriarch's will for so long that the individual people inside it had stopped being able to locate their own. She thought about her 5 conditions on a yellow notepad. She thought about the 6th condition she had added on the phone, tell me the truth. She thought about the words she had said to Dante at 2 in the morning, we. Go to Boston, Sophia said. Mia blinked. What? Apply again. Tell them you're coming. I'll talk to your father. He won't. I'll talk to your father, Sophia said again. Not loudly, in the same register she used for Fix-It on the wedding night. The register that apparently communicated something people responded to. Mia stared at her. Why would you do that? She said. You don't know me. You've known me for 3 hours. Because you came here, Sophia said. You could have stayed home. You could have stayed in the position you've been in for 2 years and deferred again and told yourself it was for your family and let that be the story. Instead, you came here and you told me the truth about your brother and you asked for something real. That took something. She looked at her. I respect that. I'll talk to your father. Mia sat very still. Then she said, he is different with you, my father. I have only seen it from the outside, but he listens to you in a way he doesn't listen to most people. He listens to sense, Sophia said. He's been surrounded by people who tell him what he wants to hear for a long time. Sense sounds different to someone like that. Is that all it is? Sophia looked at her coffee mug. I don't know yet, she said honestly, but I'm finding out. Mia left at 1:15. Priya appeared in the doorway almost immediately after with the expression of someone who had been professionally not listening for 3 hours and had many questions she was professionally not going to ask. The Delgado call, Priya said. I handled it. They're okay. And the new community health referrals confirmed for Thursday. Good. Also, Priya hesitated. A man dropped off an envelope for you at reception. He didn't give a name. The envelope has your name on it. Just your name. Not Mrs. Romano, just Sophia. Sophia looked at her. Where is it? Priya handed it over. Sophia opened it at her desk. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No letterhead. No signature. Typed in plain text in a font designed to be unidentifiable. It said, "The loyalty you are building is impressive, but it is built on a foundation that does not belong to you. Ask your husband what happened on the night of March 14th 4 years ago. Ask him about a man named Thomas Reyes. Ask him what your charity organization was used for before you ran it." Sophia read it twice. She set it on her desk. She looked at it for 30 seconds. Then she folded it and put it in her bag. She called Claire. "Someone delivered a letter to my office this morning," she said. "Dropped at reception without a name. I need to know how that happened." "I'll find out," Claire said immediately. "Are you safe?" "Yes, it's not a threat. It's information. Or something designed to look like information." She paused. "Or something designed to look like information, which is worse." "I'll be there in 10 minutes. "No. Stay where you are. I'm fine. Just find out how someone got to my reception desk without being logged." She hung up. She sat with the letter in her bag and the weight of it, and the particular discomfort of knowing that there were questions in it she was going to have to ask, and that the asking of them would change something regardless of what the answers turned out to be. She already knew what the Breckenridge operation was doing. She had told Dante on the phone that their tactic of approaching her directly would be repeated. She had been right in less than 24 hours. This was not information, it was a wedge. Something designed to be inserted between her and Dante at the exact moment when what existed between them had become real enough to be worth damaging. She understood that. She also understood that the only way to deal with a wedge was to look directly at it. She went home at 5. Dante was already there, which was unusual. He typically arrived later, and his early presence meant something had happened, or was about to. She walked into the study, and she took the letter out of her bag and she put it on his desk. "Someone delivered that to my office today," she said. "No name, no identifying information." He picked it up. She watched him read it. His expression did not change. She had become very good at reading Dante Romano's expressions, including the ones he believed he wasn't showing, and the stillness that settled over him when he finished reading was not the stillness of a man encountering a surprise. It was the stillness of a man who has been waiting for a particular door to open and has just heard the handle turn. "Sit down," he said. "I'm fine standing." "Sophia, sit down." She sat. He set the letter on the desk. He looked at her. "Thomas Reyes," he said, and the way he said the name without inflection, without any preparation, told her he was choosing to come at this directly rather than build toward it. And she recognized that as a decision, and she gave him credit for it. "Tell me," she said. He told her. 4 years ago, Thomas Reyes had been the director of a small non-profit organization on the west side of the city, a family services organization. Legitimate by every available record. A clean audit trail. Real families served real funding from real sources. Reyes himself had a background in social work, 12 years in community advocacy, and by every indication was exactly what his organization presented him as. He was also in a layer of his life that only became visible after the fact, laundering money for a mid-level operation connected to the Breckenridge family's outer network. Dante found out. Not through any intelligence operation of his own, through a city official who brought him the information as a trade for something Dante did not specify, and Sophia did not press on. He sat on the information for 6 weeks. At the end of 6 weeks, Reyes's organization collapsed. Not because of anything Dante did directly, because the financial structure Reyes was maintaining required a constant supply line that got disrupted when the mid-level operation it was connected to lost a key relationship. Without that supply line, the laundering architecture broke down, and Reyes couldn't maintain the nonprofit's apparent solvency. His organization closed. 2 months after it closed, Sophia's organization absorbed 3 of its former staff members and 14 of its active cases. The referrals had come through a community network. Everything was above board. Everything was legitimate. Everything. Dante stopped. Sophia looked at him. "You knew when I started absorbing those cases," she said. "Yes." "Did you arrange it?" "The collapse of Reyes's operation was not something I arranged. The referrals to your organization afterward." He stopped. "Did you arrange them?" "I made a call to the community network director," he said. "I indicated that your organization had capacity. The director made the referrals on their own professional judgment. I did not instruct them. I facilitated the connection." Sophia sat with that. "Why?" she said. "Because your organization deserved the cases, because the families needed continuity, and because—" He paused. "Because I had been watching your organization for 8 months before I ever spoke to you, and I believed you were the kind of director who would serve those families properly." The air in the room changed. "You were watching my organization," she said. "I was aware of it." "For 8 months?" "Yes." She looked at him. The full shape of something she had not seen before was assembling itself in front of her, and she needed to be very careful about what she said next, because the wrong question would get her a managed answer, and she needed the unmanaged one. "Was any of this," she said carefully, "was any of this accidental? The night I came to Alexander's apartment, did you know I was coming?" Dante met her eyes. "No," he said, "that was not arranged. You came of your own decision on your own timeline. I happened to be in the building for a meeting with my financial team. I heard you come in. The rest—" He paused. "The rest was not planned. But when I saw what happened, I understood that I was looking at an opportunity I had not created and could not have created. And I took it." Sophia was very still. "You took it," she said. "Yes, you saw a woman at the worst moment of her life, and you calculated an opportunity." "I saw a woman at a difficult moment who was more than the moment," he said. "There is a difference between calculating and recognizing. I was doing the second." "Are you certain of that?" The question landed. He was quiet for 4 seconds. "No," he said. "I'm not entirely certain. I know what my intentions were. I cannot know with complete certainty where intention ends and calculation begins. I am not always those things separately." She absorbed that. That answer, the honest, incomplete, self-aware answer, was the thing that kept her in the chair. A calculated man would have given her certainty. A certain man would have given her the reassuring version. Dante gave her the one with exposed edges, and she trusted exposed edges more than clean ones. "The letter," she said. "The March 14th reference. What does that date mean?" "March 14th was the night I met with the city official who brought me the Reyes information. The Breckenridge organization knows about that meeting. They have known about it for some time. They are using it now because they believe the combination of it and the question about your organization's history will make you question everything I have told you." "It does make me question it." "I know." "Are you going to tell me not to?" "No," he said. "Question everything. That is what you should do. That is what I would want you to do." He held her gaze. "Ask me anything. I will answer." She thought for a moment. "Did you ever at any point do anything that compromised my organization's work? The actual work? The families?" "No." "Did Reyes's people ever touch my organization after the referrals moved?" "No. When those families came to you, they were clean. No connection to anything that had been. Are there any current connections between your operations and my organization's work that I am not aware of?" "No." She looked at him. "I'm going to verify that," she said. "I'm going to have my own financial people audit every referral source we've worked with for the past 2 years. Independent auditors, not yours. I'll provide whatever documentation you need. I didn't ask you to provide anything. I said independent." "Yes," he said. "Independent. I understand." She stood up. She walked to the window and stood with her back to him for a moment. She was not performing distance. She needed to stand up because the sitting felt like a position she had been put in, and she needed to choose her position herself. She thought about Mia. She thought about Alexander at 19 trying to get out. She thought about Elena in the photograph with the direct expression. She thought about what it meant to be inside a world this complicated and stay honest. She turned around. "I'm not leaving," she said. Dante looked at her. "I'm not leaving," she said again. "Because nothing you told me tonight is a reason to leave. It is a reason to be clear. It is a reason to make sure this conversation is the first of a category and not the last of one." She crossed her arms. "I need you to hear something. I'm listening. I did not marry you to be managed. I did not agree to this life to be the person you show a carefully edited version of things to. If I find out not from a letter dropped by people trying to destroy you, but from anything, if I find out that you have edited what I know about my own organization or my own safety in order to make me more comfortable or more cooperative, I will leave. And the fifth condition will be the last thing I ever invoke. Do you understand me?" "Yes. Completely. Completely." She uncrossed her arms. "Good," she said. "Now I need to talk to you about Mia." The shift in topic was so clean and deliberate that it stopped him for a moment. "Mia," he repeated. "She came to see me today. She told me about Alexander, which I'll come back to. But she also told me about herself. She's been accepted to an architecture program in Boston for 2 years. She's been deferring. She needs to go." "Sophia, she needs to go, Dante. She is 21 years old, and she is staying in this city out of a sense of obligation that you have allowed to stand unchallenged because it is convenient for you to have her here. That is not the same as it being right." He looked at her. Something moved across his face that was not comfortable. "She hasn't spoken to me about Boston," he said. "She spoke to me." "She came to you before she came to me." "Yes." He was quiet. "Why would she do that?" he said. Not rhetorically, genuinely. Sophia looked at him. "Because you are the reason she hasn't left. She could not tell the person she is trying to get permission from that she needs permission to leave. So she came to someone outside that equation." The words landed. She watched him understand them. She watched him understand not just the words, but the thing behind them. The specific way that a powerful parent's love unexamined becomes a kind of gravity that pulls children into orbits they never chose and keeps them there under the name of family. He was quiet for a long time. "I didn't know she wanted to go," he said. "I know you didn't. That's part of the problem. I thought—" "You thought she was here because she wanted to be," Sophia said. "That's what we tell ourselves when the alternative is too complicated to look at." He looked at his hands. This was the most undefended she had seen him, more than the conversation about Elena, more than the night he came back from finding Alexander and sat down in the kitchen, looking tired in that deep-down way. This was something different. This was a father discovering at 54 that the life he believed he had provided for his children had also been the thing pressing them flat. "Call her tonight," Sophia said. "Not to tell her she can go, just to tell her you want to talk. Let her say it herself. She needs to say it herself." He nodded. He didn't trust his voice right now, she thought. She gave him a moment. Then she said, "The Alexander situation. Mia believes he has been trying to get out for 12 years. That the conversation you had 4 years ago about needing him in position for 3 more years was the thing that finally closed a door for him." Dante looked up. "She's not wrong," he said quietly. "I know. I needed him. At that point in the organization's structure, I genuinely needed him in that position. It was not manufactured to keep him here. It was real. I believe you. But the 3 years became more than 3 years. Yes. And I did not." He stopped, chose different words. "I did not circle back. I did not revisit the conversation. I told myself he had settled into the role, and I interpreted that as him being okay. Yes. When he was actually just out of options." Dante said nothing. Sophia sat back down. He needs a real path out, she said. Not a theoretical one. Not a someday one. A real structured, actual transition with a timeline and a plan, and someone accountable for making it happen. That is a complicated process. In our world, a transition like that involves, I'm not asking you to do it tonight. I'm asking you to decide to do it, to actually decide. Not manage it, not plan to plan it. Decide. He looked at her. If I tell you I've decided, he said, how will you know I mean it? Because you will call Mia tonight, she said, and that will tell me whether you are the kind of man who decides things and then acts, or the kind who decides things and then waits until the acting becomes convenient. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone. He called Mia. Sophia listened to one side of a conversation that was short and not fully comfortable and ended with Dante saying he would come by her apartment tomorrow morning and they would have breakfast and talk. He hung up. He looked at Sophia. Happy, he said. It was not sarcastic. It was a real question. Getting there, she said. Something small and genuine moved across his face. The audit she commissioned came back clean. 14 days of independent review, 3 different firms, every referral source for 26 months clean. No Romano money, no Breckenridge connections, no trace of anything that didn't belong. The organization, her organization had absorbed from Reyes, had been by the time it arrived at her door completely separated from what Reyes had been doing. She read the final report at her kitchen table on a Saturday morning. Dante sat across from her with his coffee, not reading it, not pretending not to read it, simply present. When she put the last page down, she looked at him. Clean, she said. I told you. You did. She set the report aside. I'm glad I verified. So am I. She looked at him. Why? Because it means you operate with integrity, whether the answer is comfortable or not, he said. That is not a small thing. That is actually the most important thing. She drank her coffee. Outside the city was doing its Saturday morning thing, slower than weekdays, louder. In different ways, full of a different quality of human movement. I want to expand the organization, she said. He looked up. The community health referrals opened up a connection to 2 neighborhood networks I've been trying to access for years. If I can formalize those relationships and hire 2 additional caseworkers, I can double the intake capacity by next spring. What do you need? Space initially. We have outgrown the current office. I have a building on West 91st that has 2 vacant floors. Clean title, no organizational connection. You could use it. At what cost? To you, nothing. Dante. Sophia. I own a building with vacant floors. You need space. This is not a complicated equation. Every equation in your world is complicated. This one isn't. She looked at him. Independent lease, she said. At market rate. Below market, and someone will eventually question it. I don't want anyone questioning my funding sources. He looked at her for a moment. Below market for nonprofits is standard practice in this city, he said. Standard nonprofit below market. Not Romano family connected below market. There's a number that's defensible, and you know what it is. He was quiet. You are more difficult than I anticipated, he said. You anticipated wrong, clearly. Is the number workable? Yes, he said. The number is workable. Good. She made a note on her yellow pad. The Breckenridge situation came to a head on a Thursday. She was in a meeting with the 2 new caseworkers she had just hired when Claire appeared in the doorway with the expression that meant something had changed in the air outside Sophia's direct view, and Sophia wrapped up the meeting in 4 minutes and followed Claire into the hallway. 3 men from the Breckenridge operation made contact with 2 of Alexander's former associates this morning, Claire said. They're building a case or something designed to look like one, alleging that the Romano family used non-profit channels to obscure financial movement over the past 3 years. They're shopping it to a journalist at a city paper. Sophia felt the specific cold of that. Not panic. Something more precise. My organization, she said. Your organization is not named in what they have. But if a story runs any story that mentions Romano financial practices and nonprofits in the same sentence, it becomes a question, Sophia said. Yes. She thought for 2 seconds. Where is Dante? In a meeting downtown. He's been notified. Who is the journalist? Claire hesitated. Claire. A woman named Karen Doyle. She covers city finance. She has a reputation for... I know Karen Doyle, Sophia said. Claire blinked. You do... She covered a story about the Community Health Network 18 months ago. She interviewed me. We talked for an hour. She is a good journalist, and she is careful about sourcing, and she will not run something she can't verify. Sophia picked up her phone. Get me her number. Sophia, she is going to hear from the Breckenridge people that there is something to find. I would rather she hear from me first, not to stop her from reporting, to make sure she knows where to actually look. Claire stared at her. You want to call the journalist who might run a story about your husband's business. I want to call the journalist who might run a story that doesn't have all the facts and make sure she has the ones that are actually true. She's going to look. She should look. I would rather she look at the right things than the wrong ones. Mr. Romano is in a meeting downtown. Get me Karen Doyle's number, Claire, please. Claire got it. Sophia called. Yeah. Karen Doyle answered on the third ring with the particular quality of someone who recognized an unknown number and answered it anyway, because journalists did not have the luxury of not answering unknown numbers. Ms. Doyle, Sophia said, this is Sophia Romano. You interviewed me about 18 months ago about the Community Health Network. I need 10 minutes of your time. A pause. Mrs. Romano, Karen Doyle said carefully, I should tell you that you've been approached by a source with information about the Romano organization and nonprofit financial practices. I know. I'm not calling to ask you to kill the story. I'm calling to offer you my organization's full financial records for the past 3 years, independently audited 2 weeks ago, which you're welcome to have reviewed by your own financial expert. I'm also offering you an on-record interview about how my organization operates and what our funding sources actually are. She paused. I believe in your reporting. I believe good reporting requires accurate source material. I am offering you accurate source material. Silence on the other end. Then Karen Doyle said, Why would you do that? Because the story someone is trying to get you to write is designed to use my organization as a vehicle for something that has nothing to do with the families we serve. And those families deserve better than to be collateral in someone else's operation. She paused. And because if there were anything in our records that should concern the public, it would be your job to report it and my obligation to accept that. There isn't. But you should confirm that yourself. Another pause. Longer. I'll need to talk to my editor, Karen Doyle said. Of course. This doesn't mean I won't pursue... I know, I'm not asking you to stop pursuing anything. I'm asking you to pursue the accurate version. Karen Doyle was quiet. I'll call you back, she said. I'll be here. Sophia hung up. She stood in the hallway of her organization's new offices, the West 91st Street floors she had moved into 3 weeks ago at a defensible below-market rate, and she breathed. Claire was looking at her with an expression she had not seen before. Not the professional composure. Something underneath that. That was... Claire stopped. What? That was not what anyone in this world would have done, Claire said. I'm not from this world, Sophia said. Not originally. No. Claire looked at her. But you're navigating it better than most people who were born into it. Sophia looked at her. Did Dante send you to watch me when this started? She said. Honestly, Claire held her gaze. He sent me to protect you, she said. Those are different assignments. I need you to know I understood that. I do, Sophia said. I know the difference. That's why I let you stay. Her phone rang. Dante, she answered. Claire told me, he said. His voice was very controlled in the way that meant he was managing something significant. You called Karen Doyle. Yes. Sophia, The audit is clean, she said. Our records are clean. A journalist investigating my organization will find nothing because there is nothing. But if I don't get ahead of this, a story runs based on Breckenridge-sourced allegations that have enough partial truth in them to survive initial scrutiny, and then my organization spends 6 months being questioned instead of serving families. I made a decision. You should have called me first. You were in a meeting. Sophia. His voice dropped. This is not small. What you just did. I know what I just did. I opened our records to a journalist. I made my organization transparent, which it should be, which it has always been. The only reason that feels dangerous to you is that you are accustomed to a world where transparency is a weapon rather than a value. She paused. In my world, it's a value. I used it. Silence. Are you angry? She said. I am. He stopped. I am trying to determine what I am. Call me back when you've determined it. She hung up. She went back to work. He called back 40 minutes later. I spoke to my attorney, he said, and to Marco, and to 2 people whose judgment I trust on these matters. And the consensus is that what you did was either the most effective counter-move available or a serious miscalculation, and none of them can yet determine which. Which do you think? A pause. I think, Dante said carefully, that you operated from a set of values that are internally consistent, and that I do not share, but that I have come to understand, produce results I cannot produce through my methods. I think that a journalist with clean records in hand is a more controllable situation than a journalist with a Breckenridge source and no counter-narrative. He paused. I think you were right. That cost you something to say. Yes. It shouldn't. I know. A beat. I'm coming home early. I'll be here. She was at the kitchen table when he arrived. He sat down across from her. They looked at each other. Mia got into the program again, he said. She called me this morning. I know, she texted me. He absorbed that the fact that his daughter had texted Sophia with news that was also Sophia's news because Sophia had been part of making it possible. She's going in September, he said. Good. I told her. He stopped. I told her I was proud of her. I told her I should have said it 2 years ago. Sophia looked at him. And Alexander, she said. We had a real conversation yesterday, the first one in possibly years. He told me things I did not know, about what he wanted, about what he had believed was impossible. He was quiet for a moment. I told him I would fix the structure, that I would make the transition happen in 12 months, with his input, not on my timeline. Did he believe you? I don't know. He said he needed time to believe it. That's honest. Yes. He looked at the table. I have been very good at building systems, and very poor at seeing the people inside them. He looked up at her. You have been helping me see the people. She held his gaze. You are a person too, she said, inside your own system. He said nothing, but something in his face opened very slightly, the way a window opens a crack, and suddenly you can feel that there is a whole world of weather beyond the glass, and the weather is real, and it is reaching you, and you had forgotten what that felt like. Karen Doyle's story ran this morning, Claire said from the doorway. They both turned. It ran, Sophia said. Online, her editor fast-tracked it. It's a piece about independent auditing standards for nonprofits in the city. It uses your organization as the primary example of a clean operating model. It mentions the audit. It mentions referral transparency. It quotes you on record. Claire paused. It does not mention the Romano name once. Sophia turned back to Dante. He was looking at her with an expression she had not fully seen before on his face. Not calculation, not assessment, not even the particular recognition she had learned to read in the months since the wedding. Something older and simpler than all of those things. You protected us, he said, without protecting us. You... He stopped. You found a way to stand inside your values so completely that the attack had nothing to attach to. That's not strategy, she said. That's just being who you are loudly enough that there's no room for the alternative story. He looked at her. I have been in this world for 31 years, he said, and I have never seen anyone do that. I know, she said. That's because it only works if you actually mean it. He was quiet. I need to tell you something, he said. Tell me. What I said on Sunday morning, 3 weeks in, when you asked if I was happy and I said I was less alone than I had been in 14 years. I remember. That was true, but it was also incomplete. She waited. I am. He looked at her, directly, the full weight of it. I look forward to Sunday mornings. I look forward to coming home. I have not looked forward to coming home in a very long time. I am telling you that not because it is something you need to manage or respond to, but because you asked me to tell you the truth, and this is part of the truth, and I did not want to be someone who edited it. The kitchen was quiet. The city outside made its Thursday evening sounds. Sophia looked at Dante Romano, 54 years old, tired in ways that would take a long time to fully reach the surface, carrying a world that had been pressing down on him since before she was born. And she understood that what he had just said had cost him more than calling Mia, more than agreeing to Alexander's transition, more than anything else he had done in the months since she had placed a necklace on a table and walked away from the life she had planned. He had told the truth about wanting, which was for a man like him the most exposed thing a person could do. I know, she said. He looked at her. I've been watching you figure out how to say that for 6 weeks, she said. You are not subtle, Dante. You are controlled. Those are not the same thing. Something moved across his face. No, he agreed. They're not. She stood up. She picked up her coffee mug. She looked at him. I look forward to Sunday mornings too, she said. That's also part of the truth. And now we've both said it, and we can stop being careful about saying it. He was quiet for a moment. Then, yes. Good. She went to refill her coffee, and the house settled around them all. Its complicated, weighted, complicated in new ways history, with the particular quality of a place that is becoming slowly and imperfectly, and without anyone's full permission, a home. Karen Doyle's story ran on a Thursday, and by Friday morning it had done something none of them had planned for. It had made Sophia visible, not in the Romano-adjacent way the city had been watching her since the wedding announcement. Not as the charity worker who married the Mafia king, not as the young woman in the complicated situation, not as anyone's symbol or anyone's narrative device. Visible as herself. As the director of an organization with clean records and transparent practices and a genuine operating model that other nonprofits in the city were now calling to ask about, because the audit standards Doyle had described in her piece were apparently something the sector had been wanting a public example of for a long time. By Monday, Sophia had 11 messages from other nonprofit directors. By Wednesday, she had been asked to speak on a panel about funding transparency at a citywide community development conference in 3 months. By the following Sunday morning, she had revised her expansion plan twice because the inbound interest had shifted what was possible faster than she had projected. Dante watched her work through the revisions at the kitchen table with her yellow notepad and her cold coffee, and the particular focused stillness she got when she was inside a problem that interested her. And he said nothing for a long time, and then he said, "You could hire a development director." She looked up. "I'm not ready to hire a development director. You are doing the work of 3 people. I am doing the work of someone building something. That's different." How? Because a development director would implement what I've already figured out. I haven't finished figuring it out yet. She looked back at her notepad. When I've finished figuring it out, I'll hire someone to implement it. He looked at her. You could also, he said carefully, accept the conference invitation. She set down her pen. You think I should do the panel? I think 3 months ago, a letter designed to damage you was delivered to your reception desk. And this week, you have 11 peer organizations asking how you operate. That is a reversal worth acknowledging. She thought about it. The panel puts me more publicly in a position where my name is attached to your name in a professional context. She said. Yes. That will generate a second round of stories. Different from the first round, but stories. Yes. You're not telling me not to do it. No. Why not? He was quiet for a moment. Because 4 months ago I watched you call a journalist and hand her our records, and I spent 40 minutes calculating whether that was a disaster, and it turned out to be the most effective thing anyone in my orbit has done in years. I have revised my instinct to tell you not to do things. She looked at him. That's growth, she said. It is uncomfortable. Growth usually is. Something like a smile crossed his face. Small, but real. She had learned to watch for the real ones. They were different from the ones he produced for professional purposes, smaller and less symmetrical, and considerably more valuable. She accepted the conference invitation that afternoon. The Breckenridge situation had not disappeared after Doyle's piece. It had simply changed shape. Sophia understood from everything Dante had told her, and everything she had observed in the months since the wedding, that the Breckenridge operation did not give up on things. They adjusted. They found new angles. The original strategy, wedging her away from Dante, damaging her organization's credibility, using Alexander as an unwitting instrument, had failed on all three fronts. That meant they were building something new, and building something new took time, and the window of time was both an opportunity and a warning. Dante knew it too. He had been in meetings she wasn't part of for the past 3 weeks, coming home later than usual, with the quality of presence that meant he was managing something complex, and was choosing which parts of that complexity to bring into the kitchen and which to leave outside the door. She let him manage that line for a while. She had her own line she was managing. At month 7, she made a decision she had been approaching gradually without fully naming it. She called her mother on a Sunday evening, not their standing call, which was Sunday afternoons, but an additional call which meant something, and her mother heard it immediately. "What happened?" her mother said. "Nothing bad," Sophia said. "I just need to tell you something." "Tell me." "I'm happy." A pause. Sophia. "I know how that sounds. I know all the reasons it shouldn't be true. I know what I walked into and what it cost me and what it still costs me sometimes. I know it's complicated." She paused. "But I'm happy. And I needed to say it to someone who knew me before all of this. Someone who would know what that means." Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then, "Tell me what it looks like." "What?" "The happy. What does it look like day to day?" Sophia thought about it. "Sunday mornings at the kitchen table," she said. "Cases that are growing instead of shrinking. Work that feels like it's actually going somewhere. Coming home to someone who—" She stopped. "Someone who asks real questions and waits for real answers. Someone who changed his daughter's life because I asked him to and didn't make it about whether it was convenient for him." She paused. "Someone who told me the truth about a thing he could have hidden and then sat with the consequence of that truth without performing his way through it." Her mother was quiet. "Do you love him?" she said. Sophia held that question. She had been holding a version of it for weeks, not avoiding it, examining it, looking at it from different angles, the way you look at something you found in the dark and are not yet certain of turning it in the light until you can see what it actually is. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "I know I respect him. I know I trust him more than I have trusted most people. I know I would rather be in the same room as him than not." She paused. "I know that 3 months ago I would have said that was enough for now, and now it feels like it might be more than I thought it was." "That's how it starts," her mother said quietly. "Mom, that's how it starts. With respect and trust and wanting to be in the room." A pause. "It didn't start with fireworks with your father, you know. It started with him being the only person who ever let me finish a sentence." Sophia smiled. "Don't tell him I said that," her mother added. "He's been gone 12 years, Mom." "He'd still find a way to be smug about it." Sophia laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that comes from deep enough that you can't manufacture it, the kind that requires something genuine to trigger it. She heard her mother smile on the other end of the line. "Be careful still," her mother said after a moment. "Always. But be happy too. Both. You can do both." "I know," Sophia said. "I'm learning that." She hung up. She sat for a moment in the quiet of the house. Then she went to find Dante. He was in the study, which was where he went when he was working through something that required more than his standard focus. She knocked on the open door. He looked up. "Can I come in?" she said. "You don't need to knock." "I know, I'm asking anyway." Something in his expression shifted. He set down what he was holding. "Come in," he said. She sat in the chair across from his desk, the one she had started thinking of as hers, which was interesting because she had not decided to start thinking of it that way. It had simply happened over enough Sunday conversations and late evenings. "Tell me about the Breckenridge situation," she said. "The current shape of it, not the managed version." He looked at her. "I was going to wait until I had more Dante." He closed what he had been working on. "They have shifted from trying to damage us publicly to building a legal case," he said. "They have retained attorneys who specialize in RICO-adjacent prosecution structures, and they are working with a federal contact, not a formal investigation yet, but a preliminary relationship that could become one. They believe that if they can generate enough documented connection between legitimate businesses and non-legitimate operations, they can force a federal inquiry that would be damaging even if it doesn't result in prosecution. What's the timeline? Best estimate 6 months before anything reaches the level of formal." "And your response?" "Separation," he said. "I have been accelerating the legitimate business transition. Structures I had planned to move in 18 months, I am moving in 6. It creates a cleaner profile." "At what cost to the people inside those structures?" He paused. "Some people will lose positions that depended on the less clean aspects of operations," he said carefully. "How many?" 14 currently, potentially more. "Are they being compensated?" "Severance, yes. Transition support where possible. Where it's not possible, we're working on it." She looked at him. "I want a list." He blinked. "Excuse me. The 14 people losing positions. I want a list. Not their names, their situations. Skills, circumstances. What kind of transition support would actually be useful versus what gets offered, because it's the standard procedure." She held his gaze. "My organization's new caseworkers are very good. They know this city's employment landscape better than your attorneys do. I want to see if there are people we can help." He was very still. "You want to help transition people out of my organization," he said. "I want to help people who are losing jobs because of a structural decision they didn't make. That's what my organization does. Their previous employer's identity doesn't change that." He looked at her for a long time. "There will be people on that list," he said slowly, "who have done things you would not approve of. Were those things done to my families? No. Then it's a separate question. A person can be more than one thing. They can have done something I would not have chosen and also deserve help finding a different direction." She paused. "You told me that's what Elena believed about you." The room went completely still. He looked at her. She had not planned to say that. It had come out of the place where truths come from when you have been thinking about something long enough that it stops waiting for permission. "Yes," he said quietly. "She did believe that." "Then let me see the list." He nodded. He turned to his desk. He wrote the number 14 on a piece of paper, crossed it out, and wrote a different number. He turned it around. It said 22. "That's the real number," he said. "Not worst case, real." She looked at it. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For telling me the real number." He looked at her, and she saw it again, that opening, that crack in the glass where the weather came through, and this time she did not give him space to close it again. She held his gaze, and she let him feel seen completely and without management, and she watched what that did to him. What it did to him was make him look briefly exactly his age, not old, not diminished. Just human, fully human in a way that power had been holding at arm's length for 31 years. "Sophia," he said. "Yes, I need to tell you something." "Tell me." There is a development in the Breckenridge situation that I have been withholding." He said it directly. No build-up, no management. The federal contact they are working with, the preliminary relationship I mentioned, it is more advanced than I characterized it. It is not pre-formal, it is formal. As of 10 days ago. The room was very still. 10 days, she said. Yes. You have known for 10 days. Yes. She felt something move through her. Not anger exactly. Something sharper and colder than anger, the specific feeling of a promise being broken by someone you had started to believe would not break it. "The sixth condition," she said. "I know." "Tell me the truth, immediately." "That was the condition." "I know." "Then why?" "Because I was afraid," he said. That stopped her. She looked at him. Dante Romano. The man who had not looked afraid of anything in 31 years of running an empire. The man whose composure in every difficult situation had been so consistent, she had started to read it as character rather than performance. Said, "I was afraid." And he meant it. She could see that he meant it. "Of what?" she said. "Of what it would do." He met her eyes. "To this. To what we have been building." I sat with that information for 10 days, and I told myself I needed more time to understand the full shape of it before I brought it to you. And that was true. But it was not the whole truth. The whole truth is that I have never had something I was afraid to lose, not in a very long time. And I did not want to bring something into this room that might make you reconsider. She looked at him. The silence that followed was not comfortable. She did not reach to make it comfortable. She let it be exactly what it was, the silence of a man who had done the wrong thing for a real reason and was sitting inside the full weight of that. "How bad is it?" she said finally. "Serious. Not unsurvivable, but serious." What does serious mean? It means the next 6 months will be the most consequential period this organization has faced in 20 years. It means decisions I make in that period will determine whether what I have been building toward the legitimate transition, the clean structure, survives, or whether it gets pulled apart before it can stand. And the families in my organization, insulated if the audit stands. And it stands. Doyle's piece actually helps here. It establishes a documented separation between your organization and anything under investigation. "So you were also," she said carefully, "protecting my organization by not telling me." "That is also true. But it was not the primary reason." "I know." She held his gaze. "The primary reason was that you were afraid." "Yes." She stood up. She walked to the window. She stood with her back to him, and she breathed slowly in through her nose, out through her mouth. And she thought about what he had just said, and what it cost him to say it, and what it meant that he had said it now rather than never. She turned around. "If you withhold something from me again," she said, "I will leave. Not because I don't understand why. Not because I don't know the difference between managing information and lying. But because I cannot function in this world. I cannot be who I need to be inside it without the full picture. And you agreed to that, and I need you to hold it." "I know. Not almost, not mostly. Hold it." "I will." She looked at him. "Do you believe you can?" she said. "Actually, believe it." He was quiet for a moment. "I believe," he said, "that the cost of not holding it is now higher than the cost of holding it. And that I am a man who responds to cost." He paused. "But I also believe, and this is the part that is less calculated, that I do not want to be the person who loses this by being afraid of losing it. I have spent enough years doing that with my children. I do not intend to repeat it." She looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said. "Okay. We deal with the federal situation, together. You tell me everything as it happens, and I will tell you what I see from my side, and we will make decisions about my organization's positioning as a unit." She crossed her arms. "But I need something from you first." "What?" "I need you to call Marco and whoever handles your legal strategy and tell them that I am in the room from now on. Not for the criminal side decisions, I am not equipped for those, and I don't pretend to be. But for anything that touches legitimate business community relationships, public positioning, I am in the room. I am not managed around. I am not informed after. I am in the room." He looked at her. She saw him weigh it not whether he wanted to, but whether he could hold it. Whether his instincts formed over 31 years of keeping people at strategic distances could be overridden by something as recent as 7 months of Sunday mornings and yellow notepads, and a woman who called journalists and made audits public and moved reading chairs. "Yes," he said. She went back to her chair. "Tell me everything," she said. "From the beginning, the real timeline." He told her. It took 2 hours. She asked 34 questions. She counted afterward. Not intentionally, but her memory for numbers was as good as her memory for conversations. 34 questions, most of which he answered fully, 4 of which he answered partially, with explanations of why they were partial, 2 of which he said he did not yet know the answer to. That ratio she considered acceptable. What she understood when he finished was this: the federal relationship the Breckenridge operation had built was real, but it was also fragile. It was built on the testimony of 2 former Romano associates who had been convinced that cooperation would benefit them, and that testimony was based primarily on financial records from a period 4 years ago that predated the legitimate transition Dante had already begun. The strongest card the prosecution could play was the Thomas Reyes connection, the city official, the information trade, the question of what had been exchanged. "That night," she said. "March 14th. What did you give the official in exchange for the Reyes information?" He was quiet. "Dante. A contract decision. A city vendor contract that went to a company with Romano-adjacent relationships." She held that. "Was it legal?" "It was within the technical parameters of legal. It was not ethical." "And the official has since retired, is not cooperating with the Breckenridge attorneys. But the record of the contract exists." "Yes," she thought. "Then the story is this," she said. 4 years ago you made a decision that was technically legal but not ethical. You used that information to protect your community, the same community Reyes was victimizing. And the families who landed with my organization are healthy and served and documented as such." She paused. "The question is whether anyone can draw a clean line from that decision to current criminal activity, and whether the legitimate transition you have been building constitutes a genuine change in direction or a cover story." "Yes, that is exactly the question." "Which is it?" He met her eyes. "It is genuine," he said. "But I understand why a reasonable person looking at the timeline would question that." "Then we don't ask people to take it on faith," she said. "We show the work. Every decision made in the past 14 months documented and contextualized. Not a legal defense, a real record. The kind of record that says this is not a man cleaning house because he got caught. This is a man who was already changing before the pressure arrived." She looked at him. "Can we build that record?" "With the right people, yes. I want to be one of the right people. Sophia, I have spent 7 months living inside this transition. I have watched decisions get made. I know the difference between a real change in direction and a performance of one, and no one who has spent 7 months watching it from the inside is going to be a more credible witness to the reality of it." She held his gaze. "I am not offering this to protect you from legal consequences you earned. I am offering this because the change is real and it deserves a real record. Do you understand the difference?" No. He looked at her. "Yes," he said. "I understand the difference." "Good. Then we start tomorrow." They started tomorrow. The next 3 months were the hardest and the most clarifying. Sophia continued her work, the panel, the expansion, the 22 people on the list, 11 of whom her caseworkers found legitimate pathways, for 3 of whom declined help, and 8 of whom were still in process. She ran the organization. She managed her cases. She met with the community health network and the new caseworkers and the 2 families who had been referred in crisis and needed more intensive support than their intake paperwork had indicated. She also spent evenings and early mornings building the record. It was not glamorous work. It was document review and timeline construction and question sessions with Dante's attorneys that sometimes ran until midnight, and calls with Marco, who had initially been skeptical of her involvement, and had revised that skepticism around week 3 when she caught a documentation gap in the business transition records that the attorneys had missed. Marco had looked at her after that. She had looked back. After that, he stopped being skeptical. The record they built was 412 pages. It covered every major business decision in the preceding 16 months. It documented the transition timeline with sourcing. It included the community relationships, the hospital funding the family protection programs, the legitimate business development, and it cross-referenced all of it against public records and independently verified financial documents. Dante's lead attorney, a woman named Patricia Hale, who was no relation to Richard Hale, and who had the particular quality of intelligence that shows itself in the precision of questions rather than the volume of answers, read through the completed record over a weekend and called Sophia on Monday morning. "I've been doing this for 23 years, Patricia said. "I have never seen a record like this. This is not a legal document. It's something else." "What is it?" Sophia said. "It's a portrait," Patricia said, "of a man in the middle of deciding who he's going to be. And the portrait it's convincing, because you can see the before and the after, and you can see the exact moments where the change happened." A pause. "Did you build this together?" Sophia said. "With Dante? It reads like someone who knows him from the inside." "I do know him from the inside." A pause. "Mrs. Romano," Patricia said carefully, "when this goes in front of the Federal Review, they are going to ask about your role, your visibility in this family's affairs. They're going to ask questions about whether you're an instrument or a principal." "I know." "What will you say?" "I'll say I'm neither," Sophia said. "I'm his wife. And I'll tell them exactly what I've told you, that I have watched a real change happen, and I can document it, and I can stand behind the documentation because it's true." She paused. "The only question that matters to me is whether the record is accurate. It is. Everything else follows from that." Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm glad you're on this side." Sophia smiled. "Me too." The Federal Review moved more slowly than anyone expected, and faster than anyone hoped, which meant it moved at exactly the pace of things that are real, not clean, not narrative, but real. In month 9, the Breckenridge Operations Federal Contact withdrew the preliminary cooperation agreement with the 2 former Romano associates, citing inconsistencies in the documentary evidence they had provided. Without the testimony, the financial records from 4 years ago were context without interpretation, and context without interpretation was insufficient for a federal inquiry of the scope they had been building toward. The inquiry was tabled, not dismissed permanently. Tabled with the possibility of reopening if new evidence emerged. Patricia called Sophia at 7:15 in the morning with the news. "Tabled," Sophia said. "For now." "For now," she repeated. "Yes. This is not finished. They will look for another angle. But the immediate threat is resolved." "Thank you, Patricia." "Thank the record," Patricia said. "The record did it." Sophia hung up. She sat for a moment in the early morning quiet. Then she called Dante. He answered immediately. He had not been sleeping. She could hear it. "Tabled," she said. A long pause. "Yes," he said. "I know. Patricia called. She called me first." A beat. "I know that too. She said she called you first because you were the one who built the record." "We built it." "Sophia." His voice was quiet and different from the way it usually sounded at 7 in the morning, even accounting for not sleeping. "I need to say something." "Say it." "What you did, not just the record. All of it. The 7 months. The conditions on the notepad, and the journalist call, and the 22 people, and the way you sat in that room with me for 2 hours in December when you had every reason to walk out." He stopped. "I am not accustomed to having someone in my life who makes the whole structure function better by insisting on doing things correctly. I don't have language for what that is." She sat with that. "It's called partnership," she said. Silence. "Yes," he said. "I think it is." "It took you a while to figure that out." "I have not historically been good at partnership." "I know. You're getting better." A sound that was almost a laugh. "I am trying." "I know that too." She stood up. She went to make coffee. And she thought about the word partnership and how it felt accurate in a way that was both ordinary and extraordinary, which was the nature of the truest things. They were ordinary in what they required and extraordinary in what they produced. Alexander came to see her in month 10, not in crisis, not through an intermediary. He called her directly on a Tuesday afternoon and asked if he could come to her office, and she said yes, and he arrived at 4 o'clock with no particular performance, and the particular look of someone who has spent a significant amount of time arriving at a decision and is now committed to seeing it through. He sat across her desk. He looked at the office, the children's artwork, the case files, the ancient coffee maker, and she watched him take it in with the particular expression of someone seeing something they had heard about but not understood. "I'm leaving," he said. "The organization. By spring. The transition is real. My father is actually doing it." He paused. "I wanted you to know I believe that. And I wanted to say it to you because you are part of why it happened." Sophia looked at him. "I'm going to open a business," he continued. "A legitimate one. Hospitality. Hotels. It's something I know because of how I grew up, but it doesn't require anything I need to walk away from." He looked at her directly. "I know that doesn't fix what I did. I know this conversation doesn't. I know what I cost you. I know that you built something real, and I damaged it, and I am not here to ask you to forgive me, or to make you feel like you have to say something generous. I'm here because you deserve to know that what you walked away from produced something, not because of me, despite me." Sophia was quiet for a moment. "How's Victoria?" she said. He blinked. "We ended it," he said. 3 months ago." "I know. Mia told me." "Of course she did." Something moved across his face. "Victoria and I—" He stopped. "I think we were two people who were both running away from something, and we confused that for having something in common." He looked at the desk. "I think I have spent a significant portion of my adult life confusing the feeling of escape with the feeling of connection." That landed with a particular honesty. "You should tell a therapist that," Sophia said. He looked up. "Not sarcastically," she said. "Actually, that insight is worth building on, and I'm not the right person to build it with. A therapist is." He held her gaze for a moment. "Yes," he said. "You're probably right." "I usually am," she said. "You should have listened to me 3 years ago." Something crossed his face, something that started as pain and ended somewhere closer to a rueful recognition. "Yes," he said quietly. "I should have." She stood up. She offered her hand. He looked at it for a moment. He shook it. "Take care of yourself, Alexander," she said. "You too," he said. He left. She stood in her office for a moment. Then she went back to work. The conference panel was on a Friday in March. Sophia arrived early. She sat in the backstage area with the other panelists. 3 nonprofit directors, a city finance official, and a professor from Columbia, who studied community economic structures, and she drank terrible conference coffee and answered questions about her expansion model and the audit framework and the community health network integration. The panel itself ran 70 minutes. She spoke for approximately a quarter of that time. What she said was not complicated. It was the truth about what it looked like to run a clean organization in a complicated city, about the value of radical transparency as a strategy rather than a liability, about the specific ways that integrity produced outcomes that strategy alone couldn't reach. She said, "The most powerful thing I have ever done is make everything visible. Not because I had nothing to hide, but because the light removes all the alternatives." She was not thinking of the Breckenridge letter when she said it. She was not thinking of the 412-page record. She was thinking about a necklace on a table in a hallway, and an elevator and a brass key she still had somewhere in the back of a drawer, because she had never gotten around to removing it from her keychain. And the very specific quality of a choice made in total clarity, without calculation, without audience, with nothing to gain and nothing to protect except the truth of who she was. The audience applauded when the panel ended. She did not remember much of the reception afterward. She remembered that 3 people approached her about partnerships. She remembered that the Columbia professor said something genuinely interesting about community economic theory that she wrote on her hand because she didn't have her notepad. She remembered that Priya texted her 3 times with updates from the office, and she handled all 3 from the corner of the room. And she remembered that when she got into the car, her own car, the one she drove herself, because some things she had not changed, she sat for a moment in the quiet before starting it, and she felt the particular weight and quality of her life settle around her, and she recognized it. She recognized it because she had not felt it before, not in this form, and the recognition was the kind that arrives not with fanfare, but with the quiet certainty of a thing that has been growing for a long time and has finally become something you can name. She felt at home. In her own life. Not in the house, though. The house had become home too. Not in the Romano name, though she had made it into something different than it was when she received it. In her own life, in the decisions she had made, and the work she was doing, and the person she had become while she was busy doing everything else. She started the car. She went home. Dante was in the kitchen. He was not doing anything. He was standing at the counter with a coffee he had not yet drunk, and when she came in, he looked at her with the expression she had spent 10 months learning to translate, the one that meant he had been thinking about something real and had been waiting for her to come home to think it out loud. "How was it?" he said. "Good," she said. "Really good." Claire said the room was full. It was full. She also said, "You said something the Columbia professor wrote down." "The Columbia professor said something I wrote on my hand." She showed him her hand. He looked at it. "Economic theory," he said. "Good economic theory." She put her bag down. "How was your day?" "I had a meeting with the transition team. We moved 2 more structures into the legitimate column. It's ahead of schedule." "Ahead of schedule is good." "Yes." They looked at each other. "Dante," she said. "Yes, I want to tell you something." "Tell me." She crossed the kitchen, and she stood across the small table from him, the kitchen table, their table, the center of the life they had been building in the ordinary, reliable way that lives are actually built, one Sunday morning at a time. "I came into this," she said, "with a yellow notepad and 5 conditions, and a very clear understanding that I was making a decision, not falling into something. I knew what I was doing." He was very still. "I still know what I'm doing," she said. "But what I'm doing has changed, and I need you to know what it's changed to." "What has it changed to?" he said. She looked at him. "I love you," she said. Simply, without management, without the particular carefulness she had been applying to her own feelings for the past 4 months. "I love you, and I am not telling you that because it requires a response, or because it changes anything about the arrangement, or because I am asking you for something. I'm telling you because it is true, and you deserve to know the true things about where you stand with me. The same way I needed to know the true things about where I stood with you." He looked at her. 10 months of Sunday mornings were in that look. 10 months of conditions and audits and federal reviews and kitchen tables, and Mia going to Boston, and Alexander shaking her hand, and Karen Doyle's clean story, and 22 people on a list, and a 412-page record of a man deciding who he was going to be. He came around the table. He stood in front of her. He took her face in his hands carefully, the way he did everything that mattered to him, and he looked at her with the full, unarchitected version of himself, the one that didn't have a performance in it, the one that was just him. Just Dante, 54 years old and holding something he had not expected to find and had no intention of letting go. "Sophia," he said. "Yes, I have loved you," he said, "since the night I watched you put a necklace on a table and walk away from my son without losing an inch of yourself. I have been trying since that night to be someone worthy of being in the same room as that." She looked at him. "You are," she said. "I am trying to be." "That's the same thing," she said, "for people like us. The trying is the being." He held her gaze. Then he said, "Thank you for the conditions." She laughed, a real one from the deep place. "The conditions. They made it possible," he said seriously. "The conditions were the thing that made it possible for me to believe this was real. That you were choosing with your eyes open. I needed that. More than I understood at the time." She looked at him. "You're welcome," she said. He pulled her in. She let him. And the city outside did its permanent indifferent city thing, full of stories it didn't know it was inside, full of people navigating worlds they hadn't planned to enter, and inside a kitchen on a Friday evening, in a life built from a betrayal that had broken the planned version and left room for the real one. Two people who had both been in cages for a long time, stood in the open air of what they had built together and breathed. 1 year later, the organization had 43 active cases. 1 year later, Mia Romano was finishing her first year in Boston and had called Sophia 4 times and Dante 7 times and was the happiest Dante had heard her sound in years. 1 year later, Alexander Romano had opened a hotel in Tribeca that was by every account genuinely good and had been photographed at a charity gala that Sophia's organization co-hosted, and had stood in a corner of the room looking at the work Sophia had built with the expression of a man who understood finally and fully the weight of what he had not known he had. 1 year later, the Breckenridge operation had undergone its own internal fracture when 2 of its principals had a disagreement about legal exposure that resulted in a dissolution the city's press covered without ever fully understanding the real cause. 1 year later, Dante Romano stood at the window in the early morning while Sophia was still at the kitchen table with her coffee and her yellow notepad, and he watched the city, and he thought about what Elena had believed, that the thing that had gotten its hands on him was not the entirety of him. She had been right. He had just needed someone to show up in his building with takeout food on the worst possible night and place a necklace on a table with exactly the dignity of a person who knew their own worth, and the whole weight of 31 years had begun slowly, irrevocably to shift. He turned from the window. She looked up from the notepad. "Coffee's fresh," she said. "Thank you," he said. He poured himself a cup. He sat down across from her. The Sunday morning light came through the window. Sophia Bennett had walked out of a life that was not hers and into one that was, and the road between those two things had been long and costly and complicated, and sometimes frightening. And she would not have traded a single day of it. Because the woman who had placed a necklace on a table and walked away without begging to stay had not been losing everything. She had been making room for the life that was actually meant to be hers. And it was exactly this,